Hello there, and welcome to Planet in Question, the little corner where curiosity never has to hurry and wonder is allowed to drift gently like a tide across the mind. Tonight, I'd like to invite you into a thought that is both soothing and strange, a question that feels almost like a lullaby whispered through the ages. What if the ocean, that vast and restless expanse that covers most of our planet, is not only a cradle of life, but also a keeper of forgotten stories? What if, far beneath its shifting waves and hidden trenches, lie the traces of civilizations long past? Civilizations erased from the surface but still gently preserved in the silence of the deep. Before we step into that idea, take a moment to notice where you are. Maybe you're curled up in bed with the light low, and your eyes already beginning to soften with drowsiness. Maybe you're listening on a quiet journey, the hum of the road mingling with this calm narration. Or perhaps you found this in the middle of the day, searching for a pocket of calm to breathe into. Wherever you are, however you've arrived here, you and I are about to lean together into a question that has no urgency, no sharp edges, only a soft pull, like the tide drawing shells back into the sea. The ocean has always been a place of mystery. For ancient sailors, it was a border between the known and the unknown, a horizon where the familiar world ended and imagination began. Even now, after satellites have mapped the continents and ships crisscross the seas, more than 80% of the ocean floor remains unseen, unmapped, and largely untouched by human eyes. Think of that for a moment. Our own planet, the world we wake up on every morning, still holds secrets vaster than anything we've charted in the skies above. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the ridges and trenches beneath our own waves. It is as if Earth itself has chosen to keep part of its story veiled, tucked away beneath blue and silver folds, waiting for someone with patience enough to listen. And so the question becomes irresistible. If most of the ocean remains hidden, what might be resting there, quietly, in its shadowed archives? Could there be ruins of places once walked by people like us, cities swallowed not by time alone but by rising waters, shifting coastlines, and the endless rhythm of tides? Could there be evidence of ways of life that flourished long before our histories began, their traces scattered on the seabed, disguised as stone or buried in silt? The human imagination has always leaned toward this thought. Stories of sunken worlds drift across cultures like flotsam, carried by different currents. The Greeks told of Atlantis, a place of knowledge and power lost beneath the waves. In India, ancient texts speak of cities taken by the sea, their towers visible under clear waters. Across the Pacific, island traditions remember lands that once stood tall above the waves, only to be swallowed when the ocean rose. Whether these are myths, memories, or metaphors hardly matters, because they carry a shared truth. The ocean does not only erase, it hides, and perhaps that is what draws us back to it, again and again, with ships, with submarines, with stories. The ocean is not only water, salt, and motion. It is also an archive, though one written in a language we barely understand. Each layer of sediment is like a page. Each fossil is a whisper. Each unusual formation, each unexpected structure, might be either the product of geology's slow hand or the faint echo of something once built and long forgotten. There is a softness to this wondering, because it does not demand proof. It is less about uncovering some grand lost city of marble columns and golden statues, and more about noticing how fragile human achievement is against the patience of water. A city on land, when abandoned, begins to crumble in mere decades. In centuries, it may be nothing but ruins overgrown with trees. In millennia, even the stones themselves may be scattered, weathered, and worn down. Now stretch that thought further. Imagine millions of years, oceans shifting, continents colliding, currents grinding away at every edge. How much of our own world today would survive such spans? Would anyone in some far future even know we were here, unless they looked in just the right place? The ocean, with its depths and its silence, might be one of the few places where whispers of the distant past can linger. The deep sea floor is less touched by storms, less disturbed by weathering winds. There, in the dark, things rest quietly, covered gently by layers of silt, and in that stillness, perhaps traces of forgotten civilizations, whether human or otherwise, lie waiting. This thought doesn't need to prove itself to be soothing. Simply letting it exist is enough. Because even if no stone temples or lost harbours rest beneath the waves, The ocean itself is a kind of civilization, ancient, vast, and ongoing. It reshapes coastlines like an architect. It builds reefs and ridges like monuments. It carries migrations and stories across its surface, like a library whose volumes are written not in ink but in currents. In its depth, one can imagine not only fish and coral, but entire forgotten chapters of life. So, as we begin tonight's slow journey into the question of what the ocean may be hiding, I want you to treat it less as a puzzle to solve, and more as a gentle walk through a dream. We'll wander into myths, into science, into the fragile nature of memory itself. We'll wonder together how civilizations rise, how they vanish, and whether they leave anything behind that water cannot wash away. And along the way, we'll pause often to notice the details, the way you might notice shells along a shoreline. If you find this sort of exploration comforting, if the thought of drifting into possibilities feels like the right kind of company, I'd be grateful if you tapped like or subscribed, or perhaps shared this little space with someone else who might need it. It helps this quiet corner find its way to more ears, more nights, more moments of calm curiosity. And now, with the world above us quiet and the ocean spread out like a mirror of the sky, let's ease into this question. What if, in its hidden depths, the ocean carries evidence not only of creatures and corals, but of civilizations forgotten, waiting in the dark, patient as the tide? 1. The ocean's veil. Imagine standing at the edge of the sea at dusk. The horizon stretches outward in a seamless band of silver and blue, a boundary that feels both close enough to touch and impossibly far away. Waves fold and unfold against the shore, each one carrying a memory of places unseen, places that may be thousands of miles away. The ocean is vast enough to appear endless, but more than its size, it is its mystery that has always unsettled and comforted us in equal measure. It is a veil, soft, fluid, and shimmering, drawn across the face of the earth. What lies beneath it is hidden from view, a world that resists full disclosure. For all of human history, the ocean has acted as both barrier and passage. It kept early peoples separated, but it also carried them to new lands when they gathered enough courage to sail into the unknown. Every coastline became a threshold, every tide a reminder that beyond the visible lay something unseen. To stand by the water is to be reminded that we do not know everything, that there are still chapters of Earth's story unread, and if the ocean is a veil, then what it conceals may be far stranger than what we expect. It might not only be fish, coral, and sand. It might be fragments of history, civilizations folded into the deep like forgotten letters pressed between the pages of a book. There is something dreamlike about the way the ocean hides. On land, time wears things down in ways that are easy to follow. Ruins crumble but remain visible. Forests may grow over them, but a watchful eye can find the outline of a wall or the suggestion of a road. The wind and rain change slowly, like a hand brushing dust from a table, revealing just as much as they erase. The sea, however, does not leave such gentle reminders. It swallows. Once a coastline is taken by the tide, it does not linger in plain sight. It becomes part of another world, one that is nearly impossible for us to explore without machines. A village submerged centuries ago can vanish entirely from our memory, as though it never existed, until some diver or sonar scan reveals its ghostly foundations. The idea of the ocean as a veil isn't just poetic, it is also practical. Light fades quickly beneath the surface. Beyond a few hundred meters, darkness becomes complete, and sight no longer serves us. Pressure builds with every descent, crushing in ways that make even the most advanced submersibles struggle. Sound behaves differently there too, bending and stretching, carrying across distances in strange echoes. The ocean does not want to be read easily, it resists. And yet, this resistance makes it all the more plausible that if a civilization had once built along ancient coasts, or if entire cities had been swallowed when seas rose, their remains could still be resting somewhere beyond our reach, shielded by this veil. Myths remind us of this possibility, though often in whispers rather than declarations. Ancient stories told of lost worlds, Atlantis sinking beneath the waves, or cities in the Indian Ocean reclaimed by floods. Oral traditions from Pacific islands speak of homelands that once stood tall above water, only to vanish when the sea surged forward. For centuries, these tales were dismissed as metaphor or fantasy. And yet, archaeology has begun to show us that many coastlines we now take for granted were once wide plains, where people lived, hunted, and built their lives. Doggerland in northern Europe, now beneath the North Sea, was once a vast expanse of fields and rivers. Off the coast of India, sonar has revealed submerged structures that could be temples or cities. Each discovery feels less like a revelation and more like a reminder that the veil does not destroy, it hides. There's something deeply humbling in this. We often picture civilization as something solid, something enduring. Buildings rise, monuments are carved, and we assume they will last. But the truth is that civilization is as fragile as a sandcastle built at the shore. It looks permanent in the moment, but the tide only needs to shift, and all that effort, all that presence, dissolves back into silence. The ocean, with its patience, makes sure that time does not need to rush. A single storm can erase the evidence of a harbour. A slow, centuries-long rise of sea levels can carry whole landscapes into oblivion. And because water moves differently than wind, because it wraps and presses rather than scatters, it hides what it takes. What once was becomes not gone, but unseen. The veil does not only conceal the past, it also conceals possibilities. Think of how many forms of life have been discovered in just the past century. Strange, glowing creatures in the deep, coral ecosystems that thrive in darkness. Entire schools of fish in places no one had ever expected them. Each new dive feels like a revelation, not only because of what is found, but because it reminds us how little we know. If life in all its variety can remain hidden so close to us, why not history as well? Why not traces of people, or perhaps beings before people, whose efforts and experiments were tucked away in the ocean's quiet folds? There's a comfort in this thought, even if it never proves true. To imagine the ocean as a veil is to accept that the world still holds secrets. In a time when satellites circle above and data pours in from every corner, it is easy to feel as though nothing unknown remains. But the ocean humbles us. It tells us that most of its story is still out of reach, that most of its flaw has never been mapped, and that what lies beneath may be stranger than we dare to imagine. The veil keeps our curiosity alive, offering glimpses, but never the whole picture. And so, when we ask whether the ocean holds evidence of forgotten civilizations, we are really asking whether this veil has preserved the memory of lives that no longer walk the surface. We are asking whether the silence of the deep is only silence, or whether it is the hush of a library filled with books we have not yet learned to open. The question does not need an answer to matter. Simply holding it allows us to see the ocean not just as water, but as mystery. And maybe, as we drift deeper into this thought tonight, we'll find that mystery is enough to soothe us, enough to keep us wondering long after the waves have quieted. 2. The depths unseen. When we think of our planet, we often picture familiar shapes. The continents on a map, the swirls of clouds in satellite images, the curved blue and green marble seen from space. These views, though beautiful, are also deceptive. They give us the impression that Earth is fully known, that we have charted and measured nearly everything worth seeing. But the truth is far more humbling. More than 4/5 of the ocean floor, the very surface that covers most of our planet, has never been mapped in detail. The sea, for all its presence in our lives, remains an enigma. We can walk across continents, we can send rovers to Mars, and yet when it comes to the ridges, valleys and plains beneath our own waves, we know next to nothing. This is the realm of the depths unseen. Picture it for a moment. Vast mountain ranges higher than the Himalayas lie hidden beneath thousands of meters of water, ridges that stretch for tens of thousands of kilometers. They are the scars of tectonic plates pulling apart, where magma wells up from Earth's mantle and creates new seafloor. These ranges snake across the globe like a great stitching, yet they are invisible from above. There are valleys deeper than Everest is tall, such as the Mariana Trench, plunging into darkness so profound that no sunlight has ever touched its floor. And scattered across these dark landscapes are features so strange they resemble alien worlds. Black smokers venting mineral-rich plumes, coral forests glowing with bioluminescence, plains of fine silt that stretch farther than deserts on land. We know of these things not because we have walked among them, but because of glimpses, scraps and outlines caught by sonar and submersibles. Most of the ocean remains beyond reach, and even when we send machines into its depths, their lights illuminate only a small bubble of space, leaving the vast darkness around them untouched. To say we have explored the ocean is like saying we have explored a forest by walking a single path with a flashlight. The deeper truth is that almost everything remains hidden, and this hiddenness has consequences. It means that the ocean is not just a body of water, it is a frontier, as unknown to us as the far side of the galaxy. We often speak of space as the final frontier, but perhaps the first frontier is still waiting at our feet, in the depths we have yet to see. What would it mean if entire chapters of Earth's story were preserved there, waiting silently for us to uncover them? What if the ocean, in its unseen expanses, holds evidence of civilizations erased from the surface but still intact in the dark? The question lingers because the conditions of the deep are both destructive and preservative. Salt water corrodes, currents scatter, pressure crushes. And yet, at great depths where light does not reach, where temperatures are near freezing, where sediments fall softly over centuries, things endure. A shipwreck can remain on the seafloor for thousands of years, its wood eaten away but its metal bones still recognizable. Artifacts dropped from passing ships centuries ago lie waiting to be retrieved, often startlingly well preserved. If human history from just a few centuries can leave such traces, what might be hidden from millennia ago or even longer? It is worth remembering how little effort we have made in comparison to the size of the task. Ocean exploration is expensive and technically demanding. Satellites can measure the surface of Mars or the Moon with clarity, but they cannot see through miles of water. Sonar, our primary tool, works slowly, mapping narrow strips of seabed at a time. Even with our best equipment, charting the entire ocean would take decades. And so we live with the paradox that we know the craters of distant worlds better than we know the basins and ridges of our own. The depths remain unseen, and in that unseen space, speculation thrives. What if, deep beneath the waves, there are ruins of cities drowned long before our recorded history began? Coastlines shift dramatically over time. At the end of the last ice age, seas rose by more than 100 meters, swallowing plains, forests, and settlements. Archaeologists have already found submerged structures off the coasts of India, Japan, and the Mediterranean, some of which may be natural, others perhaps human-made. If those shallow water discoveries are possible, then what of the deeper plains where no diver has ever gone? It may be that entire landscapes, rivers, valleys, even the traces of human or pre-human habitation, rest beneath the silt of ages, waiting quietly. And what if the unseen depths hide not only ruins but stories of life that took paths different from our own? We are accustomed to thinking of civilization as something tied to land, agriculture, and fire. But the ocean nurtures intelligence too. Dolphins navigate with complex sounds, whales sing songs across vast distances, octopuses solve puzzles with remarkable skill. These are only the species we know. In the vast dark where our lights do not reach, could there be life forms with forms of organization so unfamiliar we would not recognize them as civilizations at all? Perhaps what we call the unseen is not only physical darkness, but a blindness of expectation. We look for stone walls and streets, but maybe what endures beneath the waves takes shape so fluid, so integrated with the sea itself, that we would not know it even if we found it. This uncertainty does not need to trouble us, it can also soothe. Because if the depths remain unseen, they remain open. They remind us that Earth is not exhausted of wonder, not fully catalogued or explained. For all our science, for all our technology, there is still a vastness close at hand that humbles us, that leaves us as small as our ancestors who once looked out over the horizon and wondered what lay beyond. The ocean keeps its veil drawn, and in doing so, it preserves our sense of mystery. Perhaps that is the greatest gift of the unseen depths. They keep alive the possibility that history is not a closed book, but one still unfolding. They whisper that the world may be stranger than we imagine, that the past may hold surprises we have not yet touched. And in the quiet of the deep, where pressure bends even steel, those possibilities wait, untouched by the noise of our present age. So as we think about forgotten civilizations and whether they may be hidden beneath the sea, we must remember how vast the unknown still is. The ocean is not an empty space, but a hidden one, filled with landscapes and stories that remain unseen. Whether or not we ever uncover them, their existence as possibility is enough to remind us that our planet is more mysterious than we allow ourselves to believe. And in that reminder, there is comfort. For if mystery still lingers so close, then wonder too is never far away. 3. Myths beneath the waves. All across the world, in every corner where people have lived close to the sea, stories rise like waves about lands that once were and are no longer. They are stories of kingdoms drowned, of shining cities pulled beneath the waves, of worlds swallowed whole by a power too vast to resist. These are the myths beneath the waves, tales that might at first sound like fantasy, but linger in the mind with a curious weight, as if they carry echoes of something remembered. Humanity has always turned to storytelling to explain the unknown, and the ocean with its depths unseen and its sudden devastating surges has always been the perfect canvas for such tales. The most famous of these stories is, of course, Atlantis. First mentioned by the philosopher Plato, Atlantis was said to be a mighty island empire, rich in knowledge and resources, that vanished beneath the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. For centuries, the tale has been retold, reimagined, and relocated, painted as both cautionary allegory and tantalizing possibility. Some have dismissed it as nothing more than a parable about human hubris, while others have scoured maps and coastlines, convinced that somewhere under the waves lies the memory of a civilization lost to history. Whether Atlantis was real or not may matter less than why it still captures us, why it feels less like a fable and more like a door half opened onto forgotten truth. But Atlantis is only one story among many. In India, the ancient texts describe Dwarka, a city tied to the god Krishna, said to have been taken by the sea. Legends speak of its shining walls and temples disappearing beneath the waves, leaving behind only whispers of what once stood there. In Japan, off the coast of Yonaguni, divers have found vast stone-like structures under the water. Some believe them to be natural formations, sculpted by currents and time, while others point to what looks like deliberate shaping terraces, steps, even avenues. If the sea swallowed a city there long ago, perhaps the story became the myth we still remember today. Across the Pacific, in the traditions of Polynesia, there are songs and stories of islands that once rose proudly from the water but slipped away into the depths. These oral histories, passed from generation to generation, are not told as dreams but as memories. For the people who carried them, they were as real as the tides. In the Mediterranean too, myths of drowned lands persist, tied to earthquakes and floods that reshaped coastlines again and again. In the Americas, tales of ancient deluges echo the same refrain, that water once surged where people lived, and what was lost became the stuff of legend. It is tempting to treat all these stories as symbolic. Flood myths, after all, appear almost everywhere, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical tale of Noah, to countless indigenous traditions across the globe. Perhaps they speak less about literal floods, and more about the human sense of vulnerability in the face of nature's power. But perhaps, just perhaps, they also preserve memories of real events, catastrophic rises in sea level at the end of the last ice age, sudden earthquakes that caused coastlines to collapse, or tsunamis that swept away entire villages. Oral tradition, when carried across centuries, can retain surprising accuracy. A story told as myth may, in fact, be a memory reshaped by time. What makes these myths so haunting is that they blur the line between imagination and history. We know the ocean has risen before, we know it will rise again. We know people have lived along coasts since the earliest days of settlement, building their lives close to the resources of the sea, and we know that the sea has sometimes taken back what was built. It does not take much imagination to picture whole communities drowned, their memory carried forward, not in stone ruins but in stories, stories that became myths, myths that became timeless. And yet, myths are more than records. They are also invitations. When a sailor in ancient Greece heard about Atlantis, he was not only hearing a warning of pride and downfall, he was also hearing a possibility that somewhere beyond the horizon lay a secret world. When a villager in India told the story of Dwarka, he was not only recounting the loss of a city, but keeping alive the idea that under the waves, in places unseen, history continues to breathe. Myths, in this way, do not simply mourn what was lost. They open doors in the imagination, doors that ask, what if the sea has preserved more than we realize? Think of how myths are shaped by what people see. A storm may wash ashore fragments from deep beneath the sea, strange shells, unfamiliar fish, bits of stone shaped oddly. To those on the shore, such things must have seemed like messages from a world below. And when divers today stumble upon submerged walls or terraces, when sonar scans reveal shapes that seem deliberate, our response is not so different. We leap quickly to stories, to speculation, to the thought that perhaps the myths were right all along. The persistence of these stories across time and culture suggests something deep in us, longs to believe that civilizations do not vanish entirely, that they may fall but they leave traces, if not in ruins, then in whispers, in memories, in myths. And perhaps this longing is natural, because we sense how fragile our own place in history is. If cities can be lost to the sea once, they can be lost again. If myths remember drowned worlds, then perhaps one day our own stories will drift into the same half-light, preserved in fragments and told by distant descendants as tales of a people who lived close to the water and were claimed by it. The myths beneath the waves remind us that the line between fact and imagination is not always sharp. Sometimes stories carry truths that archaeology has not yet caught up with. Sometimes the sea hides not only ruins but memories woven into human culture itself. And even if no civilization waits to be found under the waves, the stories themselves are evidence of how deeply the ocean has shaped us, not just our lives and our landscapes, but our imaginations. It is the veil that hides, but it is also the mirror that reflects our oldest fears and hopes back at us. So when we listen to these myths, we are not only listening to the past, we are listening to a dialogue between people and the sea, one that has lasted as long as we have stood at the shore. They remind us that the ocean is not empty, that it is never silent, and that somewhere in its depths, whether in stone ruins or in the persistence of memory, something of the forgotten may still remain. And even if we never find the lost worlds they describe, the myths themselves are proof that the sea has always carried more than water. It carries our imagination, our longing, and perhaps, just perhaps, our oldest truths. 4. The ocean as an archive. If you have ever stood in a library, surrounded by shelves upon shelves of books, you might have felt a quiet awe at the thought of so many stories, so much memory, being stored in one place. Each book is a voice, each page a moment captured against the tide of forgetting. Now imagine that the ocean itself is a library, not with shelves of paper but with layers of sediment and stone, each one storing whispers of what came before. This is the way Earth remembers, not in books or scrolls, not even in ruins standing proud, but in grains of sand that settle and hold their shape for millennia. The ocean, in this way, is not just a restless body of water. It is an archive, one vast and patient enough to carry the faint traces of civilizations long gone. Sediment falls slowly, quietly, like dust gathering in an abandoned room. Over centuries, it layers the seafloor, pressing down with the weight of time. Each layer tells a story, though not in words. It tells of what lived in the water above, of the chemicals that drifted through currents, of the temperature and the climate of that age. To geologists, the seabed is less like a blank slate and more like a diary, written carefully line by line over billions of years. When cores are drilled and samples brought up, scientists read them the way you or I might trace a finger along a sentence, uncovering long-forgotten chapters of Earth's history. This archive has already given us extraordinary revelations. It has shown us the fingerprints of ancient asteroids, their impacts marked by thin layers rich in rare elements like iridium. It has revealed sudden changes in temperature, shifts in the chemistry of the sea that point to mass extinctions. It has even preserved microfossils so delicate they look like lace, remnants of life forms too small to be seen with the naked eye, yet resilient enough to carry their memory across millions of years. If such things can survive, delicate as they are, it is not impossible to imagine that traces of civilizations, perhaps chemical signatures, perhaps even fragments of tools or structures might linger too, hidden within the archive of the ocean floor. The beauty of this idea lies in its humility. The ocean does not preserve in the way we usually think of preservation. It does not keep statues gleaming or walls intact. Instead, it transforms everything into memory, pressing it into layers that wait to be read. If a great city once stood along a coastline that was later drowned, its stones might scatter, its wood might rot, its stories might vanish. But perhaps its industries left a trace in the chemistry of the sediment, a subtle fingerprint of metal or carbon, a strange ratio of elements that would stand out like a misfiled book in an otherwise orderly shelf. If such evidence exists, the ocean would be its most faithful keeper. And yet, archives are not always easy to use. Anyone who has searched through dusty boxes of old documents knows that memory is often fragmented, incomplete, or hidden beneath layers of noise. The ocean's archive is no different. Its layers are folded by tectonic movements, scattered by currents, and sometimes erased altogether. Reading it requires patience and imagination, the willingness to accept that most pages are missing, and the picture will never be complete. But perhaps that is part of the allure. The gaps leave space for speculation, for possibility, for questions that can soothe us as much as answers ever could. Think of how the ocean holds not only the memory of deep time, but also the memory of the human story. Even in recent centuries, ships that sank still rest quietly in the dark, their cargoes preserved in cold water, their stories frozen mid-sentence. Amphorae from ancient trade routes lie scattered across the seafloor, testaments to journeys long forgotten. In some places, entire harbours are buried beneath sand, invisible until shifting tides reveal them again. These are small archives within the larger one, human traces folded into the ocean's greater memory. If so much survives from only a few thousand years, what might survive from 100,000, or from 1,000,000? The ocean as an archive also challenges how we think about permanence. On land, we imagine permanence in stone monuments, pyramids, temples, towers. But stone erodes, forests reclaim, winds scatter. The ocean, though seemingly destructive, is in some ways gentler. It buries instead of scatters. It silences instead of erasing. A ruin on land may vanish into dust, but a ruin beneath the sea may remain, not as it was, but as something fossilized, something recorded in layers of sediment, waiting for us to open the archive. There is also something comforting in knowing that the ocean remembers in ways we cannot. Our histories are fragile. Paper burns, data corrupts, buildings fall. But the seabed endures. Even if all human records were lost, even if every library and every archive on land were destroyed, the ocean would still carry evidence of us. It would hold the chemical traces of our industries, the subtle markers of our age pressed into sediment like ink into paper. Long after we are gone, the ocean would still whisper to whoever comes next, telling the story that we once were here. To think of the ocean this way is to see it not as emptiness, but as presence. Every wave is a page turned. Every tide is a chapter added. The seafloor is not silent. It is filled with the echoes of everything that has ever happened above it. Civilizations may rise and fall, their names forgotten, their monuments destroyed, but the ocean continues to write, faithfully, endlessly. It is the ultimate scribe, one that never grows tired, one that never chooses what to remember or forget. And so, when we ask whether the ocean holds evidence of forgotten civilizations, we are really asking whether we have learned how to read its archive. The evidence may not look like what we expect. It may not be a stone temple gleaming in the light of a submersible, or a statue standing proud on the seabed. It may be subtler, a layer of unusual metals, a chemical anomaly, a pattern in the sediments that does not belong to natural cycles. To see these as memory requires both science and imagination, a willingness to accept that history may be stored in ways unfamiliar to us. There is a gentle poetry in this thought. It tells us that nothing is ever truly lost, that even civilizations erased from the land might still leave their fingerprints in the ocean's deep diary, that every wave we hear against the shore is not just water moving, but memory continuing, memory that will one day be layered into the seabed for others to find. And whether or not we ever uncover proof of forgotten worlds, the ocean's archive assures us of one thing, that Earth remembers far more than we do. So perhaps the next time you stand by the sea and watch the waves, you might imagine not only the surface before you, but the layers beneath, each one holding stories that stretch back beyond imagination. Some of them may be about creatures, some about climates, and maybe, just maybe, some about civilizations whose names were never written down, but whose presence lingers quietly in the ocean's patient memory. 5. The fragility of civilizations. When we think about civilizations, we often imagine them as grand, enduring things. Towering temples, intricate cities, stone monuments that seem as if they were built to last forever. We picture marble columns standing proudly against the sky, or pyramids rising from the desert with an air of permanence. And yet, if history teaches us anything, it is that civilizations are fragile. They do not last. They rise, they flourish, and they fall, sometimes leaving traces behind, sometimes leaving almost nothing at all. The ocean, in its vastness, has played a quiet but decisive role in that fragility, for it does not need to wage war or send storms to erase what people build. Time and tide are enough. Consider how quickly the world reclaims what humans abandon. A city left empty begins to crumble within decades. Roofs collapse, vegetation spreads, animals return. Within a few hundred years, a thriving place can be reduced to ruins, and within a few thousand, even those ruins may fade into the soil. If that is true on land, where wind and weather are relentless but visible, imagine what happens when the sea is involved. Salt water corrodes, currents scatter, waves dismantle with endless patience. What was once a home or a temple becomes rubble, then fragments, then sand. A civilization swallowed by the ocean may vanish so completely that, unless we search carefully, we would never know it existed. And yet, the fragility of civilizations is not only about physical ruins, it is also about memory. People themselves are fragile keepers of stories. Oral traditions fade after a few generations, unless they are carried with great care. Written records can be burned, lost, or simply forgotten. When both memory and material collapse, all that remains is absence. That absence becomes a mystery, and eventually, if we are lucky, a myth. Perhaps this is why so many cultures speak of lost cities under the sea. They are not necessarily remembering the exact details, but they are remembering the feeling of loss, the sense that what seemed permanent was, in fact, as temporary as a sandcastle. Even the great civilizations of history, the ones we still admire, remind us of this fragility. The Mayan cities, once alive with rituals and trade, now lie as ruins reclaimed by jungle. The colossal statues of Easter Island stand watch over a people whose ways of life were altered and diminished. The Roman Empire, which stretched across continents, eventually dissolved, its roads broken, its aqueducts falling to ruin. And these are just the civilizations close to us in time. They are recent enough that we can still walk their streets, still read their inscriptions. But stretch your imagination further back, into deep time, and the fragility grows sharper. What of civilizations if they existed tens of thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands, millions? How much could possibly survive, when even the greatest works of human history crumble in a fraction of that span? The ocean deepens that question, because the sea does not only erase, it conceals. A city swallowed by forest can still be uncovered by clearing trees. A ruin buried under desert sand can still be brushed clean by archaeologists, but a city taken by the sea is harder to reclaim. Once the waves have risen, once the land has vanished beneath water, it enters a realm almost unreachable. For most of human history, diving was impossible beyond a few breaths' depth. Even now, with submersibles and sonar, we have mapped only a small part of what lies beneath. This means that if entire civilizations were lost to rising seas, they may still rest there, beyond reach, neither entirely destroyed nor entirely visible. Fragility in this case means not only loss, but inaccessibility. What is striking about this thought is how quickly fragility becomes invisibility. A few thousand years is all it takes for a city to vanish beneath waves and silt. Compare that to Earth's age, 4.5 billion years, and you realize how easily entire civilizations could rise and fall without leaving a clear trace. Even our own world today, with all its skyscrapers and satellites, may not endure long in the grand scale. Metals rust, concrete crumbles, digital archives decay. 1 million years from now, the Earth may hold only the faintest chemical fingerprints of our presence. The fragility of civilization is not a flaw in human design. It is the natural rhythm of time. This fragility is also what fuels myths and stories. People sensed, even in ancient times, that their lives and their worlds were vulnerable. Floods swept away villages, earthquakes toppled temples, fires consumed libraries. Each disaster left behind not only ruins, but the uneasy knowledge that nothing made by human hands was safe from the elements. When these events were remembered and retold, they became myths of drowned cities, sunken worlds, forgotten peoples. Myths are how fragility becomes story, how impermanence becomes meaning. Yet fragility does not mean insignificance. In fact, it may mean the opposite. Because civilizations are fragile, each one is precious. Each story, each artifact, each myth is a small window into something that could so easily have been lost forever. To imagine the ocean holding evidence of forgotten civilizations is not only to speculate about ruins beneath the waves, but to honor the delicate balance between memory and loss. It is to recognize that what is fragile can still be powerful, that what vanishes can still echo across time in unexpected ways. Perhaps this is why the ocean draws our imagination so strongly. It is both destroyer and archivist, both the force that takes away and the keeper of what remains. Civilizations may crumble quickly, but the ocean, in its silence, may preserve fragments of them longer than land ever could. A shard of pottery, a layer of sediment marked with unusual metals, a drowned temple half buried in sand. Each of these could be a reminder that fragility is not the end, only a transformation. So when we wonder about forgotten civilizations beneath the sea, we are not only asking whether they existed, we are also reflecting on the delicate nature of our own. We are reminded that the things we take for granted, the cities we live in, the technologies we build, the stories we tell, are as fragile as those that came before. One day, perhaps sooner than we expect, our traces too may be washed into the ocean's keeping. And if that happens, then we too will become part of its archive, our memory folded into its depths, fragile but not entirely gone. The fragility of civilizations is not something to fear. It is something to accept gently, the way we accept the setting of the sun or the turning of the seasons. To live is to build, to leave traces, to vanish, and to trust that the ocean, in its vast patience, will carry forward at least a whisper of what we were. 6. Forgotten coastlines. If you look at a map of the world today, the outlines of continents seem so permanent, as though they have always been shaped just as we see them now. The ridges, the bays, the broad plains that meet the sea appear fixed, familiar, enduring, yet this impression is an illusion. Coastlines are among the most temporary features of our planet, constantly redrawn by the movement of water and ice. What we call the shore is not a boundary but a negotiation, a shifting line where ocean and land are always trading space. To imagine that civilizations have been erased from memory is to remember how easily whole coastlines themselves have been forgotten, swallowed not by neglect but by the rising tide. At the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago, the earth warmed and glaciers that had held back oceans for tens of thousands of years began to melt. The sea rose slowly in human terms, but rapidly in geological ones more than 100 meters. Imagine standing on a plain where rivers wound through grasslands, where families hunted, built, and traveled freely. Within a few generations, that plain would begin to flood. Lakes would swell, rivers would change course, and eventually, what had once been a homeland would be taken by the sea. It is no surprise that so many cultures tell stories of floods. They may not be exaggerations or parables, but memories of a time when the very shape of the world shifted beneath human feet. One of the most evocative examples is Doggerland, a vast stretch of land that once connected Britain to mainland Europe. 10,000 years ago, it was not an island but a peninsula, its low plains dotted with rivers, forests, and human settlements. Archaeologists believe it was home to communities who hunted deer, fished its rivers, and lived much as their neighbours did on the continent. Then the seas began to rise. Slowly, year after year, the water pushed further inland, until the land was gone. Today, Doggerland lies beneath the North Sea, invisible except for fragments dredged up by fishing nets, bones of animals, tools shaped by human hands, seeds that once grew in its soil. What was once a homeland is now a forgotten coastline, remembered only in traces. The story repeats across the world. Off the coast of India, researchers have discovered submerged ruins near the Gulf of Cambay, structures that may have once been part of settlements thousands of years old. Around Japan's Yonaguni Island, massive stone-like formations lie beneath the waves, debated endlessly as either natural sculptures or remnants of human shaping. In the Mediterranean, ancient harbours have been found submerged, reminders of cities that once thrived along shores that no longer exist. Each discovery hints at a larger truth that many of the world's earliest settlements were coastal, and when seas rose, their stories sank with them. These forgotten coastlines remind us that the landscapes we know are temporary. Imagine North America's eastern seaboard. When the seas were lower, much of what is now continental shelf was dry land. Rivers flowed across plains that are now drowned, carving valleys still visible on the seabed. People may have walked those valleys, hunted on those plains, built homes along those rivers. Today, those places are inaccessible, hidden beneath waves, remembered only if we look for them. The same is true across Asia, where the Sunda Shelf connected islands into vast stretches of habitable land. What are now Indonesia and Malaysia were once joined, forming a region larger than many modern nations. As the seas rose, that land broke into thousands of islands, each carrying fragments of the people who had once shared a common ground. Perhaps myths of lost homelands in this region carry faint echoes of that transformation. What we call archipelago was once a continent of its own, a coastline long forgotten. These examples are close in time, close enough that they brush against human memory, but stretch the thought further back, and the imagination widens. If coastlines shifted so dramatically in just 12,000 years, how many more have been erased in 100,000, in 1,000,000, in 10 million? Every rise and fall of the sea reshaped the boundary between land and water, and every reshaping carried with it the possibility that people, or perhaps other beings before us, lost their homes. For every coastline we know today, there are countless others buried under waves, landscapes that once held life but are now hidden. What makes these forgotten coastlines haunting is that they feel both near and unreachable. We live on the edge of them without realizing it. When you stand on a beach and look out, you may be looking across what was once dry land, valleys and forests now drowned. The waves you hear might be breaking over places where people once stood, where firelight once glowed, where stories were told. But all of that is gone, not destroyed entirely but concealed, folded into the ocean's quiet keeping. It is easy to imagine that civilizations are defined by permanence, by stone walls, by written records, by monuments meant to endure. Yet the truth is that much of humanity's early life left no such trace. Homes of wood or reed vanish quickly, and memories carried only by word fade just as fast. Add to that the shifting nature of coastlines, and it becomes almost certain that much of the human story has been lost to the tide. Forgotten coastlines are not just empty spaces on maps, they are chapters missing from our shared history, pages washed away before we even knew to read them. And yet, there is a strange comfort in this forgetting. To know that coastlines have always changed, that land has always been lost and found, is to recognize that impermanence is not failure but rhythm. Civilizations rise, fall, and are forgotten, just as shorelines advance and retreat. What is lost to the ocean is not necessarily gone. It may rest there, waiting, hidden under silt, preserved in fragments. Forgotten does not mean erased. It means unseen, waiting for curiosity and patience to rediscover. So when we wonder whether the ocean holds evidence of forgotten civilizations, we must first acknowledge that it certainly holds forgotten coastlines. Entire landscapes lie beneath the waves, landscapes that once were familiar, that once were home. They are reminders that the world is never fixed, that memory and geography alike are fragile. To walk along a beach is to walk on the edge not only of the present, but of countless pasts, some remembered, many forgotten. The ocean laps at them all, carrying their silence forward, reminding us that even as coastlines vanish, the story of Earth continues, endless as the tide. 7. The silence of the deep. The ocean has many voices. On the surface, waves crash and roar against cliffs. Foam hisses as it retreats across sand. Gulls cry overhead. In the shallows, tides murmur and currents tug, the water carrying a rhythm that feels alive. But as you descend, leaving the light behind, those voices fade. The deeper you go, the quieter the ocean becomes, until you enter a realm of near-total silence. It is in this silence that possibility hides, for silence can be both emptiness and concealment. Perhaps it is the quiet of nothingness, or perhaps it is the quiet of things waiting, hidden just beyond our reach. For humans, silence can feel unsettling. We are accustomed to sound conversation, wind in the trees, the hum of machines. The absence of sound leaves us uneasy, as if something should be there but isn't. In the deep ocean, that silence is amplified by the darkness. Beyond a few hundred meters, sunlight cannot reach. Beyond a few thousand, it is completely absent, replaced by a darkness so complete that it feels eternal. In that darkness, the silence is profound. No crash of waves, no cries of birds, only the faint clicking of distant creatures, the occasional groan of shifting water, the low rumbles of the earth itself. For the most part, however, the deep is hushed, Its quiet so vast that it feels almost sacred. This silence is one reason why the ocean hides its secrets so well. Archaeology thrives on visibility, on ruins left exposed to the air, on artifacts preserved in dry caves, on structures buried but still traceable beneath layers of soil. In the deep ocean, everything conspires against discovery. Pressure builds to crushing levels, making exploration difficult. Darkness blinds us. Currents shift and bury, scattering traces beneath layers of sediment. Even sound, our tool for mapping with sonar, bends and refracts in strange ways, creating images that are often incomplete. To search the deep is to work against silence itself, trying to coax it into giving up just a whisper of what it knows. And yet, there is a paradox in this silence. It erases, but it also preserves. In the absence of disturbance, things can endure for astonishing spans of time. A shipwreck left in shallow waters may be battered and broken within decades, its wood rotted, its metal corroded. But in the deep, far from light and movement, wrecks can linger for centuries, sometimes millennia. Their outlines remain sharp, their cargo still recognizable. The silence of the deep is not only emptiness, it is a kind of stillness that holds things in place. In that stillness, perhaps entire forgotten chapters of history lie waiting, shielded by silence itself. When we imagine evidence of lost civilizations beneath the ocean, we might picture grand cities resting on the seabed, columns and walls preserved like an underwater Pompeii. But more often than not, what would remain are fragments, shards of pottery, tools, stones, worked by human hands, traces so faint they would be overlooked unless carefully studied. These fragments, if they exist, would be wrapped in silence, buried under layers of silt hidden in places we rarely visit. The deep does not shout its secrets, it whispers, and only to those who lean close enough to hear. Silence also plays a role in the way we imagine these possibilities. When we think of lost civilizations, what comes to mind is often not proof but absence. We do not see the ruins. We feel their absence, a sense that something should be there but is not. The silence of the deep mirrors this feeling. Standing on a beach at night, listening to the hush of waves, we might sense something more beyond the horizon, something we cannot name. The sea itself seems to conspire with imagination, offering silence as a canvas on which our thoughts can paint stories of what might lie beneath. Science, too, is humbled by this silence. Our instruments have only just begun to scratch the surface of the deep. Sonar gives us broad outlines of the seafloor but misses finer details. Submersibles explore tiny patches, illuminating only small pockets of the dark. The scale of the ocean is simply too vast, and its silence too deep, for us to fully penetrate. What we know so far is enough to remind us how much we don't know. Hydrothermal vents discovered only a few decades ago revealed entire ecosystems we never imagined. Bioluminescent creatures drift through the blackness like living stars. Each discovery feels improbable, as though silence had been holding its breath until the moment of revelation. And so, it is not impossible to imagine that the silence of the deep might also hold traces of civilizations forgotten, their presence preserved in ways we have not yet learned to recognize. Perhaps chemical anomalies buried in sediments tell of industries long gone. Perhaps strange formations on the seabed are the remains of structures built in ages before our recorded history. Perhaps the silence itself, so complete and impenetrable, is not empty but full, crowded with memories we have not yet learned to read. The silence of the deep also invites us to reflect on the fragility of our own presence. We live in a noisy age. Our machines hum, our cities roar, our skies are filled with signals. But all of it could vanish, and in time, the ocean would cover our traces. The silence would return, patient and enduring. Our monuments and records, our technologies and stories, might dissolve into absence, leaving behind only faint echoes in the ocean's archive. The deep would once again be quiet, carrying on its hush, as though we had never been here. Yet there is comfort in this too. Silence is not only emptiness, it is also peace. The deep is not waiting to betray us, but simply being what it has always been, a place of stillness, a place beyond our reach. To imagine it holding secrets is not to imagine danger, but to imagine mystery, to accept that some things are not ours to know just yet. Silence protects as much as it conceals. It preserves what it hides, waiting for the right moment or perhaps for the right kind of curiosity to bring it forth. So when we think of the deep ocean, let us not only think of darkness and pressure, but also of silence. A silence so complete it feels like a presence, a silence that holds more than it withholds. Perhaps within that silence are the remains of forgotten civilizations, their echoes resting in silt and stone, or perhaps the silence itself is the civilization, vast and enduring, reminding us that sometimes the greatest stories are the ones that are never spoken aloud. 8. Strange structures. Now and then, in the silence of the deep, something emerges that makes us pause. It might be an image from sonar, a formation glimpsed by divers, or an outline that looks too deliberate to be dismissed as chance. These are the strange structures of the sea, places where the boundary between natural formation and human creation begins to blur. They sit quietly on the seafloor, half hidden by sand and coral, inviting speculation. Are they simply the product of geology, shaped by currents and tectonics? Or are they the remnants of civilizations whose memory has been washed away, leaving behind only these mute monuments beneath the waves? Perhaps the most famous of these is the Yonaguni Monument, discovered off the coast of Japan in the 1980 seconds. Divers found vast, terraced formations beneath the water, blocks of stone that looked uncannily like steps, platforms, and walls. To some, they appeared as if they had been carved deliberately, the remains of an ancient city submerged long ago. To others, they were nothing more than natural sandstone, fractured and shaped by earthquakes and currents into patterns that resemble architecture. The debate continues, unresolved. Yet the monument remains, a silent riddle lying under the sea, its massive shapes holding their mystery with calm indifference to human interpretation. In India, near the Gulf of Cambay, sonar scans revealed what appeared to be submerged structures stretching for miles. Divers recovered artifacts, tools, beads, even pieces of pottery that some claimed were thousands of years older than any known Indian civilization. Skeptics argue that currents may have scattered the artifacts, or that the structures themselves are simply natural features. But for those who gaze at the images, the possibility lingers. Could this be the memory of a civilization swallowed by rising seas at the end of the last ice age? The thought hangs in the air like a question, neither proven nor disproven, an invitation to wonder. Even in the Mediterranean, a sea whose coasts have been inhabited for thousands of years, strange structures lie hidden. Ancient harbours have been found beneath the waves, their breakwaters and docks preserved under layers of sand. Off the coast of Malta, the so-called cart ruts, carved into limestone cliffs, lead directly into the sea, as if the land they once crossed continued into what is now ocean. Were these ruts once roads leading to settlements now lost beneath the waves? Or were they always mysterious grooves, their purpose unknown, ending abruptly at the edge of the sea? Here too, the line between explanation and mystery remains blurred. What makes these structures compelling is not that they offer definitive proof of forgotten civilizations, but that they resist easy dismissal. Nature is a patient architect, capable of shaping rocks into forms that mimic the work of human hands. Yet humans too are drawn to build with stone, to leave behind marks that endure. When we find something that looks halfway between the two, natural yet intentional, we are left in a liminal space, unsure of whether we are looking at geology or archaeology, accident or memory. It is in that uncertainty that imagination thrives. Consider how easily our own structures could one day be mistaken for natural formations. A city of concrete and steel submerged for thousands of years would erode and collapse. Coral would grow over its ruins, fish would swim through its streets. Eventually its sharp edges would blur, its surfaces would fracture. To future eyes it might look like a natural reef, a strange but unremarkable formation on the seafloor. If that is true of us, might it not also be true of others? Perhaps some of the strange structures we puzzle over are not natural at all, but the softened remains of civilizations long gone, blurred into nature by time. The ocean complicates the question further. On land, ruins remain in plain sight. We can walk among the pyramids, the temples, the crumbled stones of ancient walls. But underwater, even when structures survive, they are hidden. They lie in places few visit, in darkness and pressure that discourage exploration. Their outlines are revealed only through brief encounters, fleeting glimpses in murky water, grainy sonar images. In such conditions, certainty is difficult, and mystery thrives. Strange structures remind us that not all mysteries are meant to be solved quickly. They are invitations to linger, to sit with the possibility that history may be stranger than we think. Whether natural or human-made, they evoke the same feeling, a reminder that the ocean hides more than it reveals, that its silence is filled with shapes we do not fully understand. They may be ruins, or they may be rocks, but in both cases, they are stories written in stone, stories we cannot yet read. It is also worth noticing how these discoveries affect us emotionally. When we see an image of steps beneath the sea, or walls half buried in sand, we feel a thrill, a sense that the boundaries of history are stretching. It is as though the past is reaching out to us, offering a glimpse of something bigger than our current story. Even when evidence is uncertain, that feeling remains. Perhaps it is not proof we are searching for, but the reminder that the world is still capable of surprising us, that there are still mysteries just beyond the horizon. And maybe that is what these strange structures truly represent, not definitive evidence, but possibilities. They are places where the imagination meets the unknown, where geology and memory blur, where we are asked to hold multiple truths at once. They tell us that the ocean, in all its silence, is not empty but filled with questions. Questions that endure regardless of whether we ever answer them. So the next time you think of the ocean, imagine not only its waves and tides, but its shapes beneath, shapes that resist easy explanation. Some of them may be ruins of forgotten civilizations. Some may be nothing more than the patient work of water and stone. But all of them remind us that the sea is not simply water. It is also memory, sculpted into forms that invite us to wonder. In that wonder lies the beauty of the unknown, a beauty that, like the ocean itself, will never truly run dry. 9. Fossilized clues. When we hear the word fossil, we usually think of bones turned to stone, shells preserved in rock, or the delicate impression of a fern etched into shale. Fossils are memories written in the language of geology, reminders that life leaves traces even after it has vanished. But fossils are not limited to creatures. They can also be clues about environments, climates, and perhaps even civilizations. The ocean, with its vast archives of sediment and silence, is a place where such fossilized clues may lie waiting, hints of stories that have not yet been told. Consider the way fossils form. A creature dies, and if the conditions are right, it is buried quickly by sediment. Over time, minerals seep in, replacing organic matter with stone, capturing the shape even as the life itself disappears. What was once fragile becomes enduring. It is a process of transformation, of memory becoming matter. In the same way, traces of human life, tools, pottery, even footprints can be preserved if they are caught in the right moment, sealed away before the tide of erosion can erase them. Fossilization is rare, but when it happens, it is powerful. It means that something has escaped the usual fate of impermanence and been carried forward into deep time. The ocean floor is littered with such possibilities. Already, marine archaeology has uncovered countless artifacts from more recent history. Amphorae from ancient trade, shipwrecks heavy with cargo, tools dropped overboard. But further back, beyond the reach of written history, there may be fossilized clues waiting that are harder to recognize. A shard of stone shaped by human hands, encased in silt for thousands of years, may one day be found far from where we expect it. A layer of unusual material buried in sediments might reveal activities we cannot yet interpret. These are not grand monuments or sunken palaces, but fragments, small and quiet, like seashells scattered on the shore. And yet, even such fragments can transform our understanding of the past. Think of how many times fossils have reshaped our view of life itself. For centuries, people had no idea that dinosaurs once roamed the earth. The discovery of their fossilized bones opened an entirely new chapter in our imagination. Trilobites, ammonites, mammoths. Each fossil revealed a world that had been forgotten, a reminder that life's story is filled with eras we barely understand. If fossils can tell us about creatures so long vanished, might they not also whisper of civilizations? A fossilized tool, a structure preserved in unexpected ways, even an imprint in stone, each would be a clue that the story of humanity, or of beings before humanity, is longer and more complicated than we imagine. Of course, the ocean complicates the matter. Fossils on land are often found when erosion exposes them. Cliffs crumble, rivers cut through rock, deserts shift and reveal ancient bones. But beneath the sea, fossils rest in silence, sealed beneath layers of sediment that rarely move. Unless we go looking for them with patience and technology, they remain invisible. This means that entire archives of fossilized clues may lie waiting beneath the ocean, untouched for millennia. We have barely begun to search. Sometimes, though, the sea offers hints. In places where ancient coastlines are now drowned, divers have found stone tools, bones, even evidence of settlements. These are not fossils in the strict sense, but they are reminders that human history is often preserved in unexpected ways. The discovery of such clues suggests that the ocean holds far more than we have uncovered, and that some of those traces may have fossilized into permanence, awaiting only the right moment to be revealed. The idea of fossilized clues also stretches our imagination beyond human history. What if civilizations older than ours existed, not in the last 10,000 years, but in the last million or even earlier? Would we expect to find their ruins intact? Probably not. Stone crumbles, metal corrodes, wood vanishes. But perhaps something of their presence could survive fossilization. Chemical imprints in rock, altered layers of sediment, or patterns that nature alone would not create. These would not be ruins we could walk among, but whispers, encoded in geology, hints that life once left its mark in ways we can barely interpret. There is a strange beauty in this idea, that even civilizations might fossilize in some form, not their monuments, not their libraries, but their traces, pressed into the Earth's memory like the impression of a leaf in stone. To discover such a clue would be to hold in our hands not proof in the way we usually think of it, but a fragment, a suggestion, a single thread in a tapestry mostly lost. And yet, as with fossils of creatures long gone, even a single thread could transform our understanding of the whole. Fossilized clues remind us that memory does not vanish. It changes form. Life becomes stone, stories become sediment, civilizations become patterns in geology. The ocean, with its patient silence, is the perfect keeper of such transformations. It buries, it seals, it holds, turning fragility into endurance. Somewhere beneath its waves, perhaps in places we have never thought to look, fossilized clues may rest, waiting for us to learn how to read them. To think of the ocean in this way is to see it not only as a destroyer but as a preserver. Yes, it erases quickly. Yes, it conceals ruthlessly. But it also holds, in its depths, the potential for memory to survive far longer than it would on land. Just as fossils have carried the memory of creatures across millions of years, so too might the ocean carry the memory of civilizations across spans we can hardly fathom. And perhaps the greatest lesson of fossilized clues is humility. For all we know, for all we imagine, the ocean still keeps most of its archive hidden. We may spend centuries searching and find only fragments, small pieces of a vast puzzle. But even fragments matter. A single fossil can change the way we see the world. A single clue beneath the waves could remind us that history is not finished, that the past is larger than our records, that the ocean still holds secrets too vast for us to claim. So when you think of fossils, do not think only of bones and shells. Think of stories turned to stone, of civilizations preserved in whispers, of oceans carrying memory forward in silence. Somewhere beneath the waves, perhaps just beyond our sight, fossilized clues may be waiting, holding the memory of forgotten worlds, reminding us that nothing is ever entirely lost. It is only transformed, waiting patiently to be seen again. 10. The Silurian hypothesis at sea. Every now and then, science offers a thought experiment that feels less like a technical question and more like a quiet invitation to wonder. One of these is known as the Silurian hypothesis, a proposal not meant to prove anything but to ask something unusual. If an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years ago, long before humans, how would we even be able to tell? Would any trace of it remain in the geological record, or would time, pressure, and shifting continents have erased it so completely that we would never know it was there? Now imagine extending that question to the ocean, which covers most of our planet and hides most of its archives. If such a civilization had risen and fallen, perhaps in a coastal world long vanished, might its only surviving memory be written in the seabed? The name of the hypothesis comes from the Silurian period, more than 400 million years ago, though the idea is not tied to that era in particular. It is less a claim about what did happen than a meditation on what we would see if it had. We often imagine that civilizations leave obvious marks: cities, monuments, roads, machines. But in the span of millions of years, even our greatest works would crumble. Metals would rust, concrete would dissolve, glass would return to sand. Continents shift, glaciers grind, oceans rise and fall. What looks solid to us is fragile in deep time. If a civilization rose millions of years ago, its ruins would likely be gone. What might remain, however, are subtler signatures, chemical changes in the soil, odd concentrations of elements, disruptions in climate patterns recorded in sediments. These would not be monuments we could visit, but anomalies we could measure, whispers rather than voices. Now place this thought beneath the ocean. The seabed is already a record keeper, layer upon layer of sediment pressed into quiet memory. It records extinctions, asteroid impacts, climate shifts. Could it not also record the presence of civilizations? Perhaps through traces of industry, fossilized pollution, or unusual isotopes. If an ancient society mined, burned, or built on a large enough scale, its actions might leave fingerprints still detectable today, faint but enduring. The silence of the deep might, in fact, be filled with such whispers, waiting for us to learn how to interpret them. This idea is both unsettling and comforting. Unsettling, because it suggests that we might not be the first. Comforting, because it reminds us that even if everything built by human hands were to vanish, something of us would endure in the planet's memory. The ocean, with its endless patience, might carry our story forward in the form of chemical anomalies, layers of carbon, or changes in sediment patterns. We would become part of the geology, a layer among layers, a chapter among countless others. The Silurian hypothesis also changes how we think about evidence. We are accustomed to looking for ruins, artifacts, visible things, but in deep time, the only evidence may be invisible, hidden in the chemistry of rocks and the layers of the seabed. Already, scientists can read the history of climate and life through tiny signals preserved in sediments, ratios of oxygen isotopes that reveal temperatures, layers rich in certain metals that reveal volcanic eruptions or cosmic impacts. If we can read such subtle signals, why not others? If an ancient civilization once produced plastics, metals, or strange compounds, might some of those survive, fossilized in sediments we have not yet examined? It is important to remember how little of the ocean floor we have studied in detail. Vast stretches remain unmapped, untouched, their sediments unexamined. Somewhere out there, in trenches or on continental shelves, there may be layers that carry anomalies we have not noticed. To the untrained eye, they would be nothing but mud and stone. But hidden in their chemistry could be the faint signature of industry, preserved like a fossilized footprint in the silence of the sea. This line of thought also humbles our sense of permanence. We imagine our civilization as enduring, but on the scale of millions of years, we are ephemeral. If we vanished tomorrow, how long would our cities last? How long before forests reclaimed them, before oceans rose and buried them, before mountains ground them into dust? Within a few tens of thousands of years, most of our visible traces would be gone. Within millions, even the ruins would dissolve. And yet, the sediments would remember. They would carry forward the chemical fingerprints of our age, traces that future beings, if any, might one day discover. They would look back and ask the same question we ask now. Was there once a civilization here, long before us? The beauty of the Silurian hypothesis is not that it proves anything, but that it stretches our imagination. It asks us to think of history not as a straight line, but as a tapestry with missing threads. It reminds us that the ocean holds more than fish and tides. It holds memory written in mud and stone. And it invites us to wonder whether the silence of the deep is simply silence, or whether it is a quiet archive of forgotten worlds, waiting for us to notice its subtle clues. Perhaps one day, as we study sediments with greater care, we will find anomalies we cannot explain, layers that suggest activity where none should be, chemical traces that seem out of place. Perhaps we will argue about whether these are natural or artificial, the same way we now debate the origins of strange structures beneath the waves. And perhaps, as with so many mysteries of the sea, we will never know for certain. But even in not knowing, we gain something precious, the reminder that the world is older, deeper, and more mysterious than we can easily imagine. So, as you think of the ocean tonight, think of it not only as a body of water, but as a book, its pages written in silence, its chapters layered in sediments. Somewhere in those pages may be the story of forgotten civilizations, whether human or otherwise, their presence fossilized in chemistry, their memory preserved in stone. The Silurian hypothesis does not ask us to prove that they existed. It asks us to wonder what it would mean if they had, and to realize that even now, the ocean is carrying our own story into the deep, into the archive of time. 11. The ocean's memory of extinctions. The ocean is often imagined as eternal, endless, immune to change. From the shore it seems so constant, the tides rolling in and out, the horizon stretching unbroken. Yet beneath that appearance of permanence lies a record of profound upheavals. The ocean remembers not only the slow rhythm of seasons but the sudden shocks of catastrophe. It holds, in its sediments and layers, the memory of extinctions, the moments when life itself faltered, when whole lineages vanished, and when the planet shifted so dramatically that the world was never the same again. Extinctions are not rare in Earth's history. They are woven into it like punctuation, marking the ends of chapters and the beginnings of new ones. Some were slow, stretched across thousands of years as climates shifted or seas advanced and retreated. Others were sudden, violent, unleashed in a single moment of cosmic impact or volcanic fury. Each time, the ocean bore witness, and each time, it preserved something of the event in its quiet archive. Thin layers of sediment rich in iridium tell us of the asteroid that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. Layers of ash and chemical shifts mark the times when volcanoes darkened the skies and choked the seas. Changes in microfossils reveal mass die-offs, sudden collapses of entire ecosystems. In this way, the ocean's floor is less a blank slate and more a library of endings, a place where extinction is remembered not as absence, but as a trace written into stone. What is haunting about this memory is its silence. Extinction is an event of violence, yet the ocean records it with calm indifference. No screams, no chaos, only a thin line of sediment, a chemical anomaly, a shift in the patterns of life. Millions of years later, scientists read these lines and reconstruct the drama they represent. The ocean does not embellish, it does not mourn, it simply remembers, pressing catastrophe into stillness. Now consider what this means for civilizations. If the ocean holds the memory of extinctions, could it also hold the memory of worlds that vanished in other ways? A city washed away by rising seas may not leave monuments, but might leave faint chemical echoes. A civilization erased by time might survive only in the smallest anomalies, the way an asteroid impact survives in a thin line of iridium. The ocean's memory does not discriminate. It records everything with the same patience, the same indifference, whether it is the fall of species or the possible disappearance of cultures we do not yet know existed. The memory of extinctions also humbles us in another way. It reminds us how vulnerable we are. For all our technology and power, we are not immune to the forces that shape the Earth. Climate shifts, rising seas, and ecological collapse are not new threats. They are patterns the planet has seen before. The difference is that now, for the first time, one of its species can recognize the pattern and can see the memory preserved in the ocean and know what it means. We are not separate from this story. We are part of it. And one day, perhaps, our own chapter may be written into the same archive, our traces layered alongside the memories of past extinctions. It is tempting to think of extinction as final, as the end of everything, but the ocean's memory shows us that it is also a beginning. After each collapse, life returned in new forms, often stranger and more complex than before. When the dinosaurs fell, mammals flourished. When earlier extinctions swept away dominant species, space was made for others to rise. The ocean remembers loss, but it also remembers renewal. In its layers are not only records of what was destroyed, but also the seeds of what came after. In this way, the ocean's memory is both graveyard and nursery, both archive and womb. This duality adds another dimension to our wondering about forgotten civilizations. If they existed, and if they vanished, the ocean might not only carry their memory but also the story of what followed. Civilizations, like species, might rise and fall in cycles, each leaving subtle traces behind, each making space for the next. We often think of ourselves as unique, the first and only. But perhaps we are part of a longer rhythm, one chapter among many, our memory one day to be layered into the same sediments that already carry the stories of extinctions past. The silence of the deep is not empty. It is heavy with memory. Each grain of silt is a fragment of time, each layer a page in Earth's story. To study them is to glimpse not only the past but the pattern of change itself. Extinction is not an anomaly. It is part of the rhythm. And in that rhythm, civilizations, whether ours or others, may be as fragile and fleeting as species. Their rise and fall written into the planet's memory without distinction. There is strangely comfort in this. To know that the ocean remembers is to know that nothing is ever fully lost. Even extinction does not erase. It transforms, it reshapes, it makes way for what is to come. The memory may be subtle, reduced to a line of clay or a shift in chemistry, but it endures. And in that endurance is a kind of immortality, not of individuals, not of nations, but of presence itself. The ocean remembers that we were here. It will remember whatever comes after. It will remember long after we are gone. So as we think about the ocean's memory of extinctions, let us also think about the possibility that it remembers more than we realize. Perhaps hidden among the layers are not only records of asteroids and volcanoes, but also whispers of civilizations erased from sight. Perhaps our own story is already being written there, in carbon, in plastic, in the subtle traces of industry. The ocean does not distinguish between natural and artificial, between creature and culture. It simply records, layer by layer, silence by silence. And in that patient memory, there is a lesson. We are not outside of history. We are not beyond extinction. We are part of the same rhythm that has shaped the Earth for billions of years. But unlike the species that came before, we can hear the ocean's memory. We can read its layers and understand their meaning. That knowledge does not protect us, but it offers us perspective, a reminder that even if our story is fragile, it is also part of something vast, something enduring, something remembered in the silence of the deep. 12. Ancient maps and strange knowledge. There is something haunting about maps. They are not just tools for navigation, but expressions of memory and imagination, attempts to capture the shape of the world and fix it onto paper or parchment. When we look at old maps, we are not only seeing coastlines and mountains as they were understood at the time, we are seeing the way people imagined their world, the way they connected fragments of knowledge into a larger whole. And sometimes, when we study those old maps, we notice details that feel out of place. Shapes of coastlines drawn long before they should have been known, islands placed where none exist today, strange accuracies hidden amid mistakes. These anomalies give rise to one of the most intriguing ideas, that ancient maps might preserve knowledge far older than the cultures that drew them, knowledge carried across generations like a fossilized memory of forgotten worlds. One of the most famous examples is the Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral of the same name. The surviving fragment shows parts of the Atlantic coastlines, including South America and what some claim may be Antarctica, drawn centuries before it was officially discovered. More curious still is the detail with which certain sections appear. Rivers, mountains, bays, features that should have been unknown to the cartographers of the early 16th century. Skeptics argue that the map simply combined information from many earlier sources, stitched together like a quilt of guesswork. But even if that is true, it only deepens the mystery. Where did those earlier sources come from? Who first charted coastlines that no one was thought to have seen? The Piri Reis map is not alone. Other maps from antiquity and the Middle Ages show fragments of knowledge that seem uncanny. Some depict islands in the Atlantic that were later discovered by explorers, though they had long since vanished beneath the sea. Others sketch coastlines with surprising accuracy, even though the navigational tools of the time should not have allowed it. Each example can be explained, of course, by chance, by misinterpretation, by the natural drift of oral traditions. Yet when taken together, they raise a quiet possibility. Perhaps these maps are echoes of knowledge carried forward from a time when the world was different, when coastlines stretched further, when lands now drowned were still dry. It is not difficult to imagine how such knowledge might have survived. Oral traditions are remarkably resilient, capable of preserving details across thousands of years. A story about a river or a coastline, repeated through generations, might eventually be recorded by a scribe who never saw it but trusted the memory of those before him. A wandering trader might carry fragments of maps, copied and recopied until the original context was lost. In this way, ancient maps may be like myths, half memory, half imagination, preserving whispers of forgotten geographies long after the lands themselves were gone. The ocean plays a central role in this. Rising seas at the end of the last ice age swallowed vast coastlines, erasing not only land but the settlements that stood upon them. Doggerland in northern Europe, the Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia, Beringia between Asia and North America, all were once dry, inhabited, full of life. When these places vanished, their memory may have lingered in stories, eventually finding their way into maps. What looks like error to us may, in fact, be memory faded, distorted, but not entirely lost. There is also the possibility that some of this knowledge was not local, but global. Ancient peoples were far more connected than we often assume. Traders and sailors carried stories across seas long before history recorded their journeys. Knowledge of coastlines might have travelled with them, spreading from one culture to another, until it found its way into maps that seem impossibly accurate for their time. In this sense, maps are not simply drawings of places but repositories of collective memory, holding fragments of civilizations long vanished. When we consider these strange maps, it is tempting to let imagination wander further. What if some of the knowledge they contain does not come from the cultures we know, but from civilizations forgotten entirely? What if there were peoples who charted coastlines before the seas rose, who mapped lands that no longer exist, whose records were lost, but whose knowledge survived in fragments passed down? It is a possibility that cannot be proven, but it lingers, like the outline of a shadow just at the edge of sight. Even if no forgotten civilizations lie behind these maps, they still remind us of how fragile and fluid knowledge can be. A coastline that seems eternal may vanish. An island that once stood tall may sink. A river's course may change, leaving behind only a story. Maps preserve these memories, but imperfectly, blending what was real with what was imagined. In this way, they are as much works of myth as of science, works that carry not only geography, but also longing. The longing to understand, to connect, to remember. The strange accuracies and oddities in old maps are not proof of anything beyond doubt, but they are invitations. Invitations to wonder whether human memory is deeper than we give it credit for, whether our ancestors carried forward more knowledge than we realize, whether the ocean's drowned coastlines are not entirely forgotten after all. Perhaps the maps that puzzle us today are the last echoes of worlds erased by the sea, their memory flickering faintly in ink and parchment. What makes this idea soothing is that it suggests continuity. Civilizations may rise and fall, lands may drown, but memory does not vanish completely. It survives in fragments, in myths, in ruins, in maps that show too much. The ocean may conceal, but people remember, and sometimes those memories reach across time in ways that surprise us. Even a scrap of a map, even a distorted drawing, can remind us that we are part of a much longer story, one in which coastlines and cultures alike are always shifting, always in motion. So the next time you see an old map, imagine not only the land it depicts, but the hands that carried its knowledge forward. Imagine coastlines now underwater, settlements now lost, stories told by firelight about rivers and shores that no longer exist. Imagine that the map is not only a record of geography, but a fossil of memory, a clue that even when the ocean takes land away, it does not take everything. Something remains, drawn faintly across time, waiting for us to notice. 13. Echoes in myth and ritual. Across every culture, in every corner of the world, stories of the sea and its power ripple through time. Some of these stories are myths told in epic cycles, full of gods, monsters, and cataclysms. Others are quieter, carried in rituals, songs, and seasonal practices that remind communities of the ocean's rhythms. Together, they form echoes, reverberations of human memory that reach us from times when coastlines were different, when seas rose or withdrew, when people watched their world change and sought ways to make sense of it. These echoes are not only tales of imagination, they may be faint reflections of real experiences, of encounters with floods, drownings, and losses that became woven into cultural memory. Think first of flood myths, which appear almost everywhere. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written thousands of years ago in Mesopotamia, tells of waters that covered the earth and of a lone survivor who built a vessel to endure the deluge. The story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible carries the same motif: a world washed clean by the sea, a family preserved, a covenant made afterward. In India, ancient texts speak of Manu, who was warned by a fish to build a boat before floodwaters came. Across the Americas, From the Aztec traditions of central Mexico to the oral histories of indigenous peoples in North America, floods appear again, always sudden, always overwhelming. The Polynesian islands, scattered across the Pacific, preserve songs about lost homelands, swallowed by the sea as waters rose. Even in northern Europe there are myths of lands beneath the water like Lyonesse, said to have once stretched off the coast of Cornwall before being swallowed by the ocean. It is possible, of course, to explain these stories symbolically. Water is a universal symbol of renewal, of destruction and rebirth, of cleansing and transformation. But when nearly every culture tells of floods, one cannot help but wonder whether memory is at work. During the last ice age, seas rose more than 100 meters, redrawing coastlines, swallowing valleys and plains where people once lived. Communities would have witnessed waters advancing generation by generation, or perhaps all at once during catastrophic surges. Those experiences may have seeded the myths that persist today, carried through ritual retelling until they became timeless. In this sense, myths are not just imagination but echoes of history, distorted but not entirely erased. Rituals, too, carry these echoes. Many cultures perform ceremonies to honor the sea, to appease it, or to ask for its favor. Fishermen in Japan once offered rice and sake to the ocean before setting sail. Polynesian navigators sang chants to guide their voyages, invoking ancestral spirits who knew the paths across the waves. In India, annual festivals honor rivers and seas, with offerings cast into the water as both gratitude and plea. In ancient Greece, sacrifices were made to Poseidon before journeys, acknowledging the sea's power to grant safe passage or sudden ruin. These rituals are more than superstition. They are acknowledgements of memory, the recognition that the ocean has taken before, that it can take again, and that it is larger than any human attempt to control it. Sometimes, rituals carry details that seem like fragments of lost stories. A seasonal ceremony marking the retreat of waters may echo an ancient flood. A prayer for safe shores may recall a time when shores themselves were uncertain. Even when people no longer remember the origin of the practice, the ritual persists, carrying with it the weight of forgotten experience. In this way, rituals are living fossils, traces of encounters with the sea preserved not in stone but in repetition. Each time they are performed, they keep alive a faint memory of times when oceans rose, when coastlines shifted, when lives were remade by water. What makes these echoes so powerful is that they blur the line between myth, history, and imagination. A flood story might be pure metaphor, or it might be a memory of rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. A ritual might seem symbolic, or it might be the continuation of a practice once rooted in survival. We cannot always tell which is which, and perhaps we are not meant to. Myths and rituals are not precise records but resonances, vibrations that linger after the original sound has faded. They remind us that memory does not always survive in documents or monuments. Sometimes it survives in song, in story, in gesture, and perhaps they remind us of something else, that the ocean itself is part of human consciousness. We did not invent these stories out of nothing. We lived beside the sea, relied on it, feared it, and watched it change. The myths and rituals we carried forward are not detached inventions but conversations with the ocean, ways of acknowledging its presence in our lives. In that sense, the echoes of myth and ritual may be as close as we come to hearing the ocean's own memory spoken in human voices. If civilizations have been forgotten, if whole coastlines with their people and stories were drowned, then these echoes may be all that remain of them. A myth of a flood may be the last trace of a community swallowed by rising waters. A ritual offering to the sea may be the echo of lives built too close to waves that eventually advanced. We may never find ruins or artifacts to prove such histories, but in myths and rituals, their presence still lingers, carried in culture rather than stone. There is a gentle comfort in this. Even if civilizations vanish, even if coastlines are erased, not everything is lost. Some of it survives in song, in story, in the rhythms of ritual repeated over centuries. These echoes are fragile, easy to dismiss, yet they are also enduring, reaching across time to remind us of what was. They invite us to wonder not only about what we have forgotten, but about how memory itself works, how it shifts and reshapes but still endures. So when you hear an old story of a flood, or see a ritual offering made to the sea, imagine it not only as symbol but as echo, an echo of people who once lived by different shores, who watched waters rise, who carried their experiences forward the only way they could through story and practice. Imagine that those voices are still with us, faint but present, carried in myth and ritual, reminding us that the ocean has always been our companion, our teacher, our mirror. 14. Underwater cities of today's coasts. Along the coasts of our world, just a short distance beneath the waves, there are places where the line between history and myth blurs in stone. These are the underwater cities' ruins that lie submerged, half hidden by sand, coral, and tides. Unlike the imagined lands of Atlantis or Lemuria, these are not only stories, they are visible, tangible, places where divers have traced walls, temples, and streets that once stood in the open air. They remind us that the ocean has already claimed parts of our human story, and that whole chapters of civilization may rest beneath the surface, waiting quietly for rediscovery. Take, for instance, the ruins near Dwarka, off the coast of India. In Hindu tradition, Dwarka is the city of Krishna, said to have been swallowed by the sea. For centuries, the story was told as myth, part of sacred lore rather than history. Yet in modern times, divers discovered structures on the seabed in the region, walls, steps, and stone foundations spread across a wide area. Pottery and artifacts were recovered, some dating back thousands of years. The debate continues over their exact age and origin, but the fact remains that a city once stood there, and that it now rests beneath the sea. The myth and the ruins are no longer separate. They are intertwined, each reflecting the other like waves reflecting the sky. In Japan, the underwater formations at Yonaguni Island remain another enigmatic example. Massive terraces and stair-like shapes rise from the seafloor, their sharp edges and geometric patterns appearing uncannily architectural. Some scientists argue they are natural sandstone formations fractured by tectonic forces, while others suggest human hands shaped them long ago. Whether natural or built, they carry a haunting presence. To swim among them is to feel as though one is moving through a drowned city, where streets and plazas are hidden in shadow, claimed by the silence of the sea. The Mediterranean, too, holds its share of submerged memories. Off the coast of Egypt, the ancient city of Herakleion lay forgotten for over 1,000 years, buried beneath water and sand. Once a bustling harbour where Greeks and Egyptians met for trade and ritual, it sank slowly into the sea, perhaps after earthquakes and floods weakened its ground. When divers rediscovered it in the early 2000s, they found statues toppled on the seabed, temples submerged, and inscriptions still legible. The city had not vanished completely, it had only been hidden, preserved in water like a secret kept too long. Closer to Greece, parts of the city of Pavlopetri, off the coast of Laconia, also lie underwater. Believed to be one of the oldest known submerged cities, it dates back more than 5,000 years. Its layout is still visible, with streets, courtyards, and houses mapped beneath the waves. To imagine people once walking those streets, living their lives where fish now swim, is to feel the fragility of the line between land and sea. What feels permanent to us can be washed away in a single geological sigh. Even in the Caribbean and off the coasts of the Americas, divers have reported finding stone formations that appear ordered, as though shaped by intention. Some are dismissed as natural features, others remain debated. Whether human-built or natural, their allure is undeniable. They suggest that the boundary between myth and archaeology is not as sharp as we like to think. Sometimes, the ocean takes history and myth and folds them together into one story. A story told not in books, but in ruins, half buried beneath the waves. What makes these underwater cities so moving is that they are not distant speculation. They exist. They are there to be seen, to be touched, to be swum among. They remind us that rising seas have already rewritten history, that coastlines have shifted dramatically in just a few thousand years. Civilizations we once thought confined to land have, in fact, left their traces beneath the water. And if these few examples are what we have already found, how many more might still rest undiscovered in the 80% of the ocean we have yet to explore? The presence of submerged cities also changes how we think about memory. When myths tell of lands swallowed by the sea, we often assume exaggeration. Yet when archaeology uncovers ruins that match the myths, we see that memory sometimes persists, even across millennia. Myths and ruins become two voices singing the same song, one in story, one in stone. Together, they remind us that history is not fixed, but fluid, shifting like the tide. There is also a humbling lesson here. Civilizations build with confidence, imagining permanence in stone and steel. But the ocean is patient. It waits. A city may stand for centuries, yet one day its foundations may weaken. Its harbour may sink, its streets may lie silent beneath the waves. To look at underwater ruins is to see not only the past, but also a mirror of our own future. One day, perhaps, parts of our coastal cities will rest in the same silence, remembered not by bustling life, but by fish weaving through their remains. And yet, there is beauty in this as well. The ocean, in swallowing cities, does not erase them completely. It transforms them. A temple beneath the waves becomes a reef, alive with coral. A statue becomes home to schools of fish. What was once human is woven into the fabric of the sea, becoming both ruin and renewal. In this way, underwater cities are not only reminders of fragility but also symbols of continuity. They show that memory persists, not in the way we expect, but in forms both quieter and more enduring. So when we speak of underwater cities, let us not only think of Atlantis, the imagined, but of Dwarka, Yonaguni, Heracleion, Pavlopetri, the real. These places show us that the ocean already holds our history, that civilizations have already been claimed, and that myths and archaeology sometimes meet in the same depths. They are not just ruins, they are conversations between past and present, between land and sea, between memory and forgetting. And in their quiet presence beneath the waves, they remind us that the ocean does not simply take, it keeps. It remembers. It whispers of the worlds it has claimed, waiting for us to listen. 15. The ocean as refuge. When we think of the ocean, we often imagine it as a boundary, a vast barrier that separates one land from another. To our ancestors it was the unknown, the place beyond the horizon where danger and mystery dwelled. But what if the ocean was not only a barrier but also a refuge, a place where life, under threat from the surface, could retreat and endure? Perhaps even a place where entire civilizations might have chosen to seek shelter, slipping beneath the waves not by accident, but by intention. The idea seems strange at first, almost fantastical. We are creatures of land after all. Our lungs crave air, our bodies rely on firm ground. But when we look more closely at the ocean, we see that it has long been a refuge for life. When extinctions swept across the continents, the seas often held on to species that later repopulated the earth. When climates grew harsh, coastlines provided milder conditions, allowing life to adapt and persist. Even today, deep ocean vents, far from sunlight, sustain thriving ecosystems where life is protected from the chaos above. The ocean shelters as much as it devours, and in that shelter one cannot help but wonder, could intelligent life in some form have chosen the sea as its sanctuary? Marine animals show us that intelligence is not confined to land. Dolphins and whales communicate with remarkable complexity, their songs carrying for miles across the water. Octopuses solve puzzles and navigate mazes, displaying problem-solving skills that surprise us again and again. If such intelligence can evolve in the ocean, why should we assume that civilizations must always rise on land? Perhaps in the deep past, life capable of culture and community found its way beneath the waves, building not with stone and fire, but with materials and methods adapted to water's embrace. If such civilizations existed, their traces might not resemble ours at all. Their cities might have been reefs, their tools organic, their records woven into patterns of sound or bioluminescence. To us, these would leave little behind. To them, it may have been enough. Even within human history, there are hints that the ocean has been treated as a refuge. In times of invasion, people retreated to islands, building their lives surrounded by water as a shield. Entire cultures flourished in archipelagos, drawing their strength not from armies but from navigation, their survival from their ability to live with the sea. In myths and traditions, we find stories of people who vanished beneath the waves, not destroyed, but hidden, continuing their existence in another realm. The Irish spoke of Tir na Nog, a land across the water where life continued in beauty and peace. In other cultures, there are stories of undersea kingdoms, ruled not by gods but by ancestors who chose the ocean as their home. These tales, though fantastical, carry a kernel of possibility, that the sea might not only claim life but protect it. To imagine the ocean as refuge is to soften the starkness of loss. When we think of forgotten civilizations, We often picture tragedy, floods, collapses, ruins abandoned and left to silence. But what if some were not destroyed, only transformed? What if, faced with rising seas or catastrophic change, some found a way to adapt, to continue beneath the waves? Perhaps not in the forms we would expect, but in ways that allowed their memory, their essence to survive. If so, the ocean might not only conceal ruins, it might still shelter living traditions, hidden in places we have not yet learned to see. This thought does not require proof to be soothing. It is enough to imagine it, to let it drift across the mind like a tide. Think of the vastness of the ocean, trenches deeper than mountains are tall, plains stretching farther than deserts, landscapes entirely unseen. Within those spaces, there is room for refuge, for life to retreat and persist, for civilizations to continue in silence. Whether or not such beings exist, the possibility reminds us that survival is not always about dominance, but about finding the quiet places where one can endure. Even in our own time, we can see how the ocean becomes a refuge in smaller ways. Coral reefs teem with life, sheltering creatures in their complex structures. Kelp forests provide havens for fish and mammals alike. Shipwrecks become artificial reefs, transformed into sanctuaries long after their original purpose has been forgotten. Everywhere we look, the ocean takes what is vulnerable and gives it protection, turning fragility into endurance. If it does this for animals and plants, why not for memory? Why not, perhaps, for civilizations? There is a gentle reversal in this idea. We usually see the ocean as the destroyer of civilizations, the force that drowns coastlines and erases histories. But in imagining it as a refuge, we see another face. The ocean does not only take, it also gives. It offers a silence in which things can continue, unseen, undisturbed. Perhaps that is why so many myths speak of undersea kingdoms, not as ruins but as living places, vibrant and enduring. They are not lost forever. They are simply elsewhere, in a realm protected by water's veil. To walk along the shore is to feel this duality. On one side, the land with all its noise and impermanence. On the other, the sea with its depth and stillness. Standing there, it is easy to imagine that what has vanished from the land might still be present beneath the waves, alive in ways we cannot comprehend. The ocean as refuge becomes not just a metaphor but a meditation, a reminder that what seems lost may still exist, transformed, hidden, but not gone. So when you hear stories of civilizations swallowed by the sea, consider that they may not be only tales of destruction. They may also be whispers of refuge, of life that found another way to endure. The ocean, with its vastness and patience, may still hold those lives in its keeping, not as ruins but as continuities. And even if such civilizations exist only in imagination, the thought itself is enough to soften the edges of loss, to remind us that endings are rarely final, and that the ocean, vast and silent, may be more of a sanctuary than we realize. 16. Technology that leaves no trace. When we think of civilizations, we usually imagine their technology as the clearest proof of their existence. Stone tools, bronze weapons, iron forges, steam engines, satellites, the material remains of ingenuity, seem like the footprints of progress across history. But what if technology did not always leave such obvious traces? What if there were ways of living, ways of building, ways of creating, that vanished almost completely once the people themselves were gone? The ocean, in its silence, invites this question. It swallows wood, corrodes metal, grinds stone into sand. It could take a civilization built on fragile organic technologies and erase nearly every sign of it, leaving behind little more than whispers in sediment. Our own world demonstrates how easily this can happen. Consider how long modern materials last in the ocean. A wooden shipwreck, unless buried quickly in sand, is eaten away within a few centuries. Metal vessels corrode within a few thousand years at most. Even reinforced concrete, the hallmark of our age, would crumble to dust in tens of thousands of years. On the scale of millions, nothing would remain. Plastics, strange as they are, might endure in fragments, but even they would break down eventually, ground into particles too small to identify their origin. If this is true of our technologies, how much more so of those based on materials that decay even faster? We imagine technology as heavy, metallic, resistant, but what if an advanced civilization developed in a different direction, one that emphasized organic materials, biodegradable tools, ephemeral structures designed to return quickly to nature. To them, such technologies might have been elegant, efficient, even superior. To us, they would be invisible. Nothing of them would fossilize, nothing would endure. An entire world of innovation could vanish without a trace, swallowed by time and tide. Even within human history, there are examples of technologies that leave little behind. The most ancient tools were made of wood, bone, and fiber materials that rarely survive the ages. Clothing, boats, baskets, ropes, musical instruments, all fragile, all perishable. Archaeologists know they must have existed, yet only rare conditions such as desert dryness or waterlogged peat bogs preserve them. What survives, mostly stone and metal, skews our perception. We think of ancient people as primitive because we cannot see the full range of what they made. Perhaps civilizations long forgotten faced the same fate. They may have been far more sophisticated than the fragments we now find suggest, but because their technologies left no trace, we cannot see them clearly. Now extend this thought to the sea. Suppose there were societies that adapted not to stone building but to coral, kelp, shell, or other marine materials. Suppose they shaped their world with sound, with light, with organic compounds that dissolve when their makers vanish. In such a case, there would be nothing for us to find, no ruins to stumble upon, no tools to recover. The ocean would erase their presence completely, save perhaps for subtle patterns in the environment, patterns we would not recognize as technological because we expect technology to look like ours. This invites us to rethink what we mean by evidence. If a civilization's tools and structures left no durable remains, what would we look for? Perhaps chemical signatures in sediment, unusual concentrations of elements. Perhaps patterns in fossilized reefs, where growth might have been guided or altered. Perhaps anomalies in the distribution of species, reflecting cultivation or manipulation. These would not look like ruins. They would look like puzzles, natural oddities. Without the right perspective, we might not see them at all. The thought is humbling, because it reminds us that history is not only about what happened, but about what remains visible. The record we study is partial, skewed by preservation, distorted by chance. To imagine technologies that leave no trace is to accept that there may be whole chapters missing from the story, chapters that ended without leaving footprints we can follow. The ocean, vast and erasing, may hold many such absences, entire civilizations whose tools and crafts dissolved into silence. And perhaps this is not only a loss, there is a quiet beauty in the idea of technologies that return fully to the earth, leaving no scars. Our own world struggles with the weight of waste, the permanence of plastics, the stubbornness of metals. But imagine a world where every tool, every structure, every object was made to vanish gracefully, returning to the sea or the soil without harm. Such a civilization might see permanence not as strength but as burden, preferring a harmony in which nothing endured longer than it was needed. If such a people existed, we would never know them through ruins or relics. We would know them only through the stories carried forward in myth, in ritual, in echoes too faint for stone. The idea also speaks quietly to our own impermanence. We like to think of skyscrapers and satellites as proof of our endurance, yet in time even they will fade. The ocean will reclaim the coasts, forests will reclaim the cities, rust will reclaim the metal. Our technologies, like those of any who came before us, will one day leave almost nothing behind. Perhaps in some future, distant beyond measure, another species will wonder whether we ever existed at all. They may find only faint chemical signatures in sediments, the ghostly outline of our presence. And they may ask, as we ask now, what if there were others before us, whose technologies left no trace? In the end, the thought is not meant to unsettle but to soothe. It tells us that absence does not mean impossibility, that what is forgotten is not always what never was. The ocean teaches us this lesson daily, erasing and concealing, yet also hinting at mysteries we cannot explain. Strange structures, odd artifacts, anomalies in sediment, all of these may be clues, or they may be coincidences, but behind them lies the deeper truth, that not all technologies leave footprints, and not all civilizations leave ruins. Some are remembered in silence, in the way the sea reshapes everything it touches, until only the memory lingers, as soft as a tide washing over sand. So when we think of the ocean as keeper of forgotten civilizations, let us remember that what we are searching for may not look like what we expect. The ruins we imagine may never be found. The tools we anticipate may have dissolved long ago. And yet, somewhere in the quiet folds of the sea, there may still be traces not in stone, not in steel, but in the subtle echoes of lives and technologies that chose to vanish, leaving behind nothing but the possibility of their existence. 17. Hidden continuities. When we imagine civilizations, we often think of them as isolated chapters. One rises, flourishes, and then falls, leaving behind ruins that another, far away, may never see. Yet the truth of human history, and perhaps of all history, is that nothing is so neatly divided. There are continuities, threads that run quietly through time, sometimes hidden beneath the surface, sometimes visible only in faint echoes. And when we think of the ocean, we can imagine that many of those continuities lie concealed beneath its waves, connecting the forgotten to the remembered, the visible to the unseen. Continuities are not always obvious. They do not always take the form of monuments or inscriptions. Sometimes they are patterns, similar shapes carved in distant lands, similar myths told in far-apart tongues, similar practices repeated across cultures that never seem to meet. To us, they appear as coincidences, or at best, mysteries. But to those who lived them, they may have been simply memory carried forward, knowledge passed down across generations, adapted, transformed, but never entirely lost. The ocean, with its shifting coasts and drowned valleys, may have interrupted those connections on the surface, yet it may also have preserved them in silence, holding on to fragments until they resurfaced in unexpected ways. Think of the megalithic structures scattered across the world, stone circles in Britain aligned with the stars, massive blocks in Peru, carved and fitted with uncanny precision. Monolithic statues on Easter Island, gazing out over the sea. Each culture claims its own, and archaeology carefully places them within their local contexts. Yet one cannot help but feel a subtle resonance between them, as though they are variations on a theme too deep to name. Could there have been continuities here, shared knowledge, ideas carried by seafarers long before our records begin, fragments of an older memory surviving through adaptation? If parts of these continuities lie beneath drowned coastlines, then what we see may only be the scattered tips of something once far more widespread. Language offers another kind of continuity. Myths of floods, sunken lands, and vanished homelands appear across cultures, often with surprising similarity. Scholars see these as archetypes, symbols that naturally arise in human storytelling. But perhaps they are also continuities, echoes of shared experiences with the ocean, repeated and remembered in ways that transcend geography. A rising tide in one land becomes a legend in another. A drowned valley becomes a myth of a lost world. Over time, the details shift, but the continuity remains. The ocean itself may be the thread that binds these stories, carrying memory across space and time in the minds of those who live beside it. Even rituals may carry hidden continuities. Consider how many cultures offer gifts to the sea, cast food or drink into its waters, or sing songs to accompany voyages. These practices are found across the globe, from Polynesian navigators to Mediterranean sailors to coastal tribes of the Americas. Each tradition appears distinct, rooted in its own culture. Yet when placed side by side, they resonate like notes of the same melody, suggesting a continuity too ancient to trace. Perhaps these are not separate inventions, but memories of an older way of living with the sea, carried forward through ritual even as civilizations rose and fell. The idea of hidden continuities becomes even more intriguing when we imagine civilizations that may have been lost entirely. If whole coastlines were drowned at the end of the last ice age, the people who lived there would have carried their knowledge inland, sharing it with others, weaving fragments of it into new cultures. The ruins may be gone, but the knowledge may remain, hidden in the continuities we see today. A star map in one land, a myth in another, a ritual in a third together. They might be the scattered remnants of something once unified. The ocean, in swallowing the land, may not have erased the civilization entirely. It may simply have forced its memory into new forms, hidden but enduring. What makes this thought soothing is that it suggests nothing is truly lost. Even when civilizations vanish, even when their ruins are erased, something of them continues woven into the practices, stories and dreams of those who came after. These continuities may be faint, invisible to us unless we look carefully, but they are there. The ocean, vast and patient, may not only conceal ruins, but also act as a bridge, carrying memory across generations in ways we do not fully understand. Our own world today carries such continuities without our noticing. Technologies we think of as modern often echo older inventions, reshaped for new purposes. Myths we tell in books and films echo stories told around fires thousands of years ago. Even our fascination with the ocean as mystery is itself a continuity stretching back through countless generations who stood at the shore and wondered what lay beyond. In this way, we are part of the same pattern. We are not the end of history, but its continuation, carrying forward echoes we may not even realize we hold. To imagine hidden continuities is to see history not as a series of disconnected fragments, but as a flowing tide, one wave blending into the next. Civilizations rise and fall, but their memory persists, sometimes in obvious ways, sometimes in ways almost too subtle to notice. The ocean is part of this flow. It erases, but it also preserves. It conceals, but it also connects. Its silence is not only absence, but also continuity, the thread that binds forgotten worlds to the present. So as you think of the ocean tonight, imagine not only its waves and depths, but its role as a keeper of continuities. Imagine that beneath its surface lie not only ruins, but also threads of memory, weaving past into present. Imagine that the myths, rituals, and patterns we see across the world are not coincidences, but echoes, hidden continuities that remind us that nothing is ever entirely lost. The ocean, in its vastness, may be less a boundary than a bridge, carrying forward the memory of civilizations we have forgotten, binding us to them in ways we can feel but not always see. 18. Messages in the seafloor. The seafloor may appear, at first glance, to be nothing but mud, rock, and silence. A dark, cold expanse stretching endlessly, broken only by ridges, trenches, and the occasional scattered wreck. Yet for those who study it, the seafloor is not blank at all. It is a record, a vast scroll on which Earth has written its history with slow, steady strokes. Every grain of sediment that settles, every layer of silt and sand, is like a word, part of a message that stretches back millions of years. To imagine forgotten civilizations is to wonder whether some of those messages belong not only to geology and biology, but perhaps to beings who lived before us, whose traces are written into the very floor of the sea. Scientists already know how much the seafloor remembers. Its sediments capture volcanic ash from eruptions, microscopic shells from plankton blooms, pollen from vanished forests, and traces of chemicals from cosmic impacts. Each layer is a chapter, stacked neatly upon the next, waiting for someone to read. Thin bands of unusual elements mark moments of catastrophe. Fossilized remains of tiny creatures reveal long changes in climate. Even the shifts in magnetic fields are recorded in stone, showing how Earth's poles have flipped again and again. If the seafloor can hold all of this, why not also the subtler signals of civilizations? The possibility does not seem so far-fetched when one considers how even our own presence is already being inscribed. Plastic particles settle to the depths, mingling with sand and silt. Heavy metals from industry drift downward, embedding themselves in mud. Nuclear isotopes, byproducts of our experiments, have already become markers of our age, signatures that will remain detectable for thousands, perhaps millions, of years. Without meaning to, we have written messages in the seafloor messages that will outlast us, whether anyone ever reads them or not. If this is true of us, it could be true of others before us. If there were civilizations long forgotten, perhaps their presence too is buried in layers of sediment waiting for discovery. The challenge is interpretation. Messages in the seafloor are not like carved inscriptions or carefully written texts. They are subtle, encoded in chemistry, in anomalies that might look natural unless seen in the right context. A spike in carbon might suggest industry, or it might suggest a natural firestorm. A cluster of unusual elements might be pollution, or it might be the residue of a volcano. We must learn to distinguish between nature's handwriting and civilizations, between what Earth produces on its own and what living beings might have added. The difficulty is immense, but the possibility is intriguing. Sometimes, hints appear. Odd layers with concentrations of metals, unusual chemical deposits that seem out of place, sudden changes in the fossil record that suggest more than natural catastrophe. These may have explanations we do not yet understand, or they may be whispers of something more. The seafloor is filled with such puzzles, anomalies that resist easy answers. To the cautious mind, they are geological curiosities. To the wondering mind, they are messages faint, partial, but enough to make us pause. There is a strange poetry in this thought. Imagine a civilization long gone, knowing that everything they built would vanish, that their cities and tools would dissolve into nothing. Perhaps they accepted this, trusting the ocean to carry forward the only memory that mattered, the trace of their presence inscribed in sediments. Not a monument for others to visit, but a signature written into the earth itself, as subtle and enduring as a line of ink in a vast book. Whether they intended it or not, the seafloor would keep their message, holding it until someone, perhaps us, perhaps someone long after us, learned how to read it. And perhaps this is what memory truly is. Not the permanence of stone or the clarity of words, but the persistence of traces, however faint. A change in chemistry, a pattern in mud, a layer that does not fit. These are the messages the ocean carries, messages that remind us that nothing is ever entirely lost. Even when civilizations vanish, even when their ruins are gone, something of them may linger in the seafloor, written in silence, waiting patiently to be noticed. The seafloor is also vast beyond comprehension. We have explored only small parts of it, mapped less than a quarter of its features in detail. Most of it remains unseen, untouched, unknown. Somewhere in those depths may be messages we have not yet encountered, clues so subtle they require patience beyond our current reach. For now, they remain hidden, preserved in darkness, folded into the ocean's archive. This is perhaps the most humbling part of the idea that the answers to our questions may already exist, inscribed in plain layers of sediment, but that we do not yet know how to find them. To imagine the seafloor in this way is to see it not as emptiness but as an immense library. Its shelves are not of wood and paper but of stone and silt. Its language is not letters but chemistry, fossils, and patterns. And like any library, it requires us to learn how to read. Each time we drill into cores of sediment, each time we study a new anomaly, we are turning a page, uncovering part of the story. Sometimes the story is one of nature alone. Sometimes it hints at more. In both cases, the message is the same. The seafloor remembers, and in its memory may lie truths we have forgotten. So the next time you think of the ocean, picture not only its waves and depths, but its floor quiet, dark and steady, holding messages older than humanity, perhaps even older than we can imagine. Some of those messages tell of volcanoes, asteroids, and extinctions. Others may whisper of civilizations that lived and vanished before memory began. We may never know for certain, but the possibility itself is a kind of message, reminding us that the ocean is more than water. It is also an archive, a keeper of silence, a writer of history in layers of sand and stone. 19. Dreams of Atlantis. Few names stir the imagination as deeply as Atlantis. For more than 2,000 years it has lingered in human thought, half history, half dream. Plato was the first to write of it, describing a great island civilization that grew powerful and proud before being swallowed by the sea. Whether he intended it as allegory, memory, or invention remains uncertain. Yet from that brief account, an entire mythology has grown, one that continues to echo across cultures and centuries. To speak of forgotten civilizations beneath the ocean is, in some sense, always to speak of Atlantis, for it has become the symbol of what might lie hidden in the deep. What gives Atlantis its power is not the details. Plato's account is sparse and ambiguous, but the resonance of the idea. A great civilization, advanced and magnificent, destroyed not by enemies but by the sea itself. It is a story that speaks to both awe and humility. Awe, because it suggests that others may have achieved greatness long before us. Humility, because it reminds us that no greatness is immune to the forces of nature. Atlantis is not simply a lost city, it is a mirror reflecting our own hopes and fears about civilization's fragility. Over the centuries, countless places have been proposed as the site of Atlantis. Some point to the Mediterranean, suggesting Crete and the Minoan civilization, which flourished and then fell after earthquakes and eruptions. Others look to the Atlantic, imagining islands that once bridged Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Still others place it in the Caribbean, in South America, or even in Antarctica. Each theory has its champions, each supported by fragments of evidence or by resonances with myth. None have been proven, yet none have been forgotten. The persistence of these theories shows that Atlantis is more than a location. It is a longing, a question that refuses to fade. What is striking is how many cultures have their own versions of Atlantis-like tales. Lands swallowed by the sea, cities drowned, islands lost. Whether in the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, or the northern coasts of Europe, the stories recur, echoing Plato's account even where no direct influence could have existed. This suggests that Atlantis is not only a Greek story but a human one, a reflection of a shared experience, the memory of rising seas at the end of the Ice Age, when coastlines vanished and whole regions disappeared beneath the waves. Atlantis, then, may not be one place but many. It may be the name we give to a universal memory of loss. And yet, Atlantis also lives in dreams of possibility. To imagine it is to imagine that we are not the first to build, not the first to imagine, not the first to rise and fall. Perhaps there were others, not recorded in our histories, whose achievements were washed away. Atlantis becomes a placeholder for all forgotten civilizations, real or imagined. It gathers into itself every mystery of the sea, every strange structure, every submerged ruin, every myth of a flood, and gives them a single name. It is less a city than a symbol, the dream of continuity stretching further back than our records allow. What makes Atlantis enduring is that it speaks equally to skepticism and to wonder. Skeptics see it as a parable, a warning about hubris and decline. Wanderers see it as possibility, a hint that the ocean may conceal more than we know. Both are right, in their way. Atlantis works because it does not demand proof. It asks only for imagination, for the willingness to hold open the idea that history may be deeper and stranger than we think. Even in our modern world with satellites and sonar, Atlantis continues to inspire. Expeditions search for it, books are written, documentaries made. But perhaps its true power lies not in being found, but in remaining hidden. As long as it is unseen, it remains pure possibility, unspoiled by certainty. To dream of Atlantis is to accept that mystery itself is valuable, that not every story requires resolution. The sea, after all, keeps many of its secrets not to deny them to us, but to remind us that wonder thrives in what is not yet known. There is also a quiet beauty in imagining Atlantis not as a single place, but as a symbol of all that the ocean remembers. Every submerged city, from Heraklion to Pavlopetri, is a fragment of Atlantis. Every myth of floods and lost lands is a whisper of Atlantis. Every strange structure debated by archaeologists is a shadow of Atlantis. In this way, Atlantis is not a myth alone, but a tapestry woven from countless stories, a dream that gathers truth and legend into one enduring image. Perhaps in the end, the dream of Atlantis is less about the past than about ourselves. We see in it the reflection of our own world, powerful yet fragile, capable of wonders yet vulnerable to the forces we cannot control. Atlantis warns us, comforts us, and inspires us all at once. It says, civilizations rise, they shine, they fall, but something of them remains, if only in memory, if only in story. The ocean does not erase completely, it keeps the echoes, and those echoes shape our imagination forever. So, when you hear the name Atlantis, do not ask only where it was, or whether it was real. Ask instead why it matters, why it continues to stir hearts after 2,000 years. Perhaps the answer is that Atlantis is all lost worlds, all forgotten civilizations, all the mysteries that the ocean still holds in silence. To dream of Atlantis is to dream of the ocean's memory itself, deep, vast, and unending. 20. The ocean's final secret. When we speak of secrets, we usually imagine something hidden but knowable. A locked door waiting for the right key, a puzzle waiting to be solved. The ocean, however, teaches us that some secrets may not be solved at all. They may remain mysteries not because we lack the tools, but because mystery itself is part of their nature. To imagine the ocean's final secret is to step into a space of humility, to recognize that even if we map every coastline, probe every trench, and study every layer of sediment, there will always remain something beyond reach, something the sea keeps for itself. The ocean has already revealed so much. It has shown us ruins on the seabed, fossils in its layers, and stories preserved in myth and ritual. It has shown us how civilizations can vanish, how coastlines can shift, how memory can endure in fragments. Yet with every revelation comes a reminder of how much more remains unknown. We have explored less than a quarter of the ocean floor in detail. Most of its depths remain unseen, its trenches untouched, its archives unopened. Each time we learn something new, the horizon of mystery expands, as though the ocean were gently reminding us that knowing everything is not the point. Perhaps the ocean's final secret is not a city or a civilization, but the simple truth of impermanence. Everything that enters the sea changes. Wood dissolves, stone crumbles, metal corrodes, even memory itself shifts into myth. Nothing survives unchanged, and yet nothing is ever completely erased. The ocean does not destroy so much as transform, carrying fragments forward into new forms. In this way, it mirrors life itself. We too vanish, but something of us continues an echo, a trace, a ripple in the story of the world. The ocean holds this lesson quietly, in its tides, in its silence, in its endless patience. But it is also possible to imagine the final secret more literally. Perhaps somewhere in its depths lies a truth about Earth's story that would change everything we believe. A fossilized clue of a civilization long forgotten, a message left behind, inscribed in ways we do not yet understand. A continuity so subtle that it binds us to beings who lived before us, reminding us that we are part of a much longer arc. The ocean may keep such a secret not out of malice, but because some truths require time. Perhaps we are not ready to see them. Perhaps they are waiting for another age, another species, another way of looking. It is worth remembering that the ocean has always been our greatest teacher of humility. For countless generations, people stood at its shores, looking out at horizons they could not cross. It was the unknown, vast and dangerous, but also the source of life and renewal. When sailors learned to cross it, new worlds opened. When scientists learned to study it, new truths emerged. And yet, even now, with satellites and submarines, the ocean remains vast beyond our comprehension. Its final secret may simply be that mystery is endless, that the more we know, the more there will always be to wonder about. There is comfort in this. To live in a world with no mysteries would be to live in a world stripped of wonder. The ocean ensures this will never be the case. Its depths, its silence, its hidden memories, all remind us that some things are meant to remain unknown, or at least uncertain. Not every ruin will be explained, not every myth will be proven. Not every anomaly will be resolved, and that is not a failure. It is a gift. It is what allows us to imagine, to dream, to wonder. If forgotten civilizations lie beneath the sea, perhaps their greatest legacy is not their ruins, but the questions they inspire. Perhaps the ocean's final secret is that what matters most is not whether they existed, but how the possibility of their existence shapes us. We tell stories, we create myths, we look out at the horizon and feel curiosity stir within us. That curiosity is itself a kind of continuity, a thread binding us to all who have stood at the shore before us, wondering what lies beyond. The ocean's final secret, then, may be the endlessness of wonder, the fact that mystery itself is the true inheritance of the sea. As this long journey draws to a close, imagine the ocean at night. The waves are quiet, the horizon dark, the stars reflected in its surface. Beneath lies silence, depth, memory. Cities may rest there, or only stones. Civilizations may be preserved in fragments, or lost entirely. Myths may be echoes of truth, or dreams woven into story. We do not know, and perhaps we never will. But in that unknowing, there is peace. The ocean whispers not answers, but possibilities. Its final secret is that mystery itself is part of the world, a reminder that we are small, fragile, and temporary, yet also capable of dreaming beyond ourselves. So let us leave the ocean as it is vast, unknowable, and beautiful in its silence. Let us honor its secrets not only by seeking them, but by accepting them, by letting them remind us that some questions are meant to remain open. For in the end, it may be that the ocean's greatest gift is not what it reveals, but what it keeps hidden, waiting, forever deep, forever silent, forever mysterious.